To order this meeting of the Scottsdale Unified School District Governing Board. Today is February 22nd, 2022. For those of you who are mathematicians, I know this is a Paladin sequence, so pretty interesting. At this time, I would like Board Member Beckman to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Board Member Beckman. At this time, I'd like to request a roll call, starting with to my far right.
Zach Lindsay.
Jan Michael Greenberg.
Patty Beckman.
I was expecting Board Member Vice President Hartwells to chime in. She's planning on joining us. Apparently, she's just not here yet. We have 4 of the 5 board members present. Dr. Menzel, we have a quorum?
Yes.
And we move on to 3 student and staff recognitions and celebrations. Dr. Menzel. We are going to back up and approve the agenda. I would like all of you to look carefully at the consent and the action items on the agenda. Are there any proposals of changes to that? Board Member Greenberg.
I'm sorry, I don't have any changes.
Oh, you're lighting up on my key here. This is your name. Okay, so it's a little bit out of order. Mr. Lindsay.
Yeah, can we pull item E from consent?
Note that we will be pulling 8E, personal action items. Any others? Nope, that's it. So do I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
The first and a second. The agenda will be voted on. All in favor of approving the agenda as amended, say aye.
Aye.
And none opposed. Now we move on to our student and staff recognition and celebrations.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Menzel.
Good evening, President Sanowski and members of the Governing Board. We are pleased to present some outstanding celebrations this evening, some that we mark annually, as well as some new accomplishments that we are celebrating tonight for the first time. One of the hallmarks of being a Scottsdale Unified School District school is being willing to put your school under a microscope and really dig into how your school is performing, what students are learning, how teachers collaborate, and how your parent community is involved. That is what Cherokee Elementary School has done through the Arizona Educational Foundation for the 3rd time. Our Assistant Superintendent for Elementary Education, Dr. E.B. Hagigat, will explain more.
Dr. Menzel, and good evening, President Sanowski, Vice President Hartwells, if you're up there, governing board members, and Mrs. Wagner. We have some wonderful achievements to share with you tonight, and I'm honored to be the one getting us started. Each year, Arizona Public Schools are invited to commit to a demanding, introspective look at themselves, their programs and practices, their commitment to excellence, equity, service, and sustained high achievement, as well as their parent and community involvement. It is a months-long endeavor, and it's little wonder that not many schools undertake the challenge of becoming an Arizona Educational Foundation A+ School of Excellence. Yet we gather here tonight to honor Cherokee Elementary School having been named an A+ school for the 3rd time and one of 21 schools statewide. As if the application process and comprehensive examination by a group of A+ judges isn't enough, Cherokee, led by Principal Walt Chandler and Assistant Principal Paul Anderson, braved not only campus reconstruction project in the process, but a global pandemic. This is truly an impressive achievement and a credit to Cherokee's leadership, its teachers and staff, the school students, and their parents. I would like to invite Principal Chandler to please share some thoughts with us tonight.
Good evening, Dr. Menzel, Governing Board President Sanowski, members of the board. Thank you so much for having us out this evening. I'd like for my staff and some of the parents that came to visit today to come join me up here in the front. This is a celebration of all of you. I've been in Scottsdale a long time, 21 years now, and I've been at Cherokee since 2010, and in 2013 we went out for A+ for the first time, and then 2017 we did it again. We were up for renewal in 2021, but for obvious reasons, all the ones you can think of, construction, worldwide pandemic, we decided to put the reapplication on hold. The next year came around and things were still happening in our world, but my staff followed me and decided we're going to go for it anyway. I'm proud to say that the 21-22 year rolled around and we just went for it. We knew we had the right stuff and we could demonstrate that we could face almost any challenge thrown at us and come out on top. We wrote a rigorous application to the Arizona Foundation and were chosen to receive a site visit due to the quality of our application. The site visit took an enormous amount of effort. I'd like to thank a few people for helping us to realize this great honor. I'd like to start with Dr. E.B. Hagigat. All along the way, she encouraged me and the staff to continue moving forward and supported our efforts along the way. Dennis Rayler. I'd like to thank Dennis and all the great folks in building services for making the school look beautiful for the site visit. They did so many things behind the scene, people have no idea. They got our facility in tip-top shape. The Cherokee Association of Parents and Teachers, or APT. Without them, there would be no us. Cherokee parents have always supported us and helped us to realize our goal, and some of the parents are with us today. If you could raise your hand directly in the back. Thank you so much. The Cherokee students, they're so amazing. They care about their students and exhibit great pride. You guys see how I did that? CARE is our acronym for our PBIS program, and we're really proud of that. They show great things. They do things every day that make us proud. And next, I'd like to thank the staff. The staff is talented. They're hardworking. They're dedicated to the profession of teaching. Specifically, I'd like to give out some individual shout-outs to some staff members who helped me to write the A+ application in the summer of 2021. Laura Batko, Amber Lindsay, Brenda Nelson, Ann Waddington, who's not here with us tonight, Nikki Kaiser, and her mother, Peggy Kaiser, who's not with us tonight, and my right-hand man, Cherokee's AP, Paul Anderson. I'd also like to thank the AEF lead judge, Gina DeCoste, and her panel of A+ judges for the wonderful feedback, conversations, and ideas during their site visit. It was such a positive experience. Lastly, I'd like to thank the Arizona Education Foundation for putting together such a wonderful program. The process to become A+ is difficult, yet very rewarding. I encourage any of my principal colleagues to undergo this rigorous process. You'll learn a lot about your school, identify challenges, and create new opportunities. It also re-energizes your staff and builds morale. This is my third go-around with A+, and each time I've done it, I've learned a great deal. Thank you so much for your time this evening. We have our new banner to display in our cafeteria. Mr. Anderson, if you can take a friend or two up front, and let's show that to our guests tonight. Bring it up to the front.
So we would have to own our mint to have enough SUSD recognition coins to go around for everyone who has played a critical role in your becoming this name A+ school for 4 years. Since we don't have that mint, we'd like you to accept this coin on behalf of a grateful district, an appreciative assistant superintendent, and a proud community. Mr. Chandler, to you and your staff and your community, congratulations.
Thanks, everyone.
Congratulations, Chargers, and thank you for your contributions to SUSD's 125 years of excellence in education. We're very proud of you. It's a great school. Well done.
Thank you.
Reading, of course, is fundamental skill for all students. Dr. Melissa Sackos, our Secondary Education Assistant Superintendent, is going to tell us about what reading means at Echo Canyon School. Dr. Sackos.
And I bring with me a lot of mint. All right, thank you, Dr. Menzel, and good evening, President Sanowski, Vice President Hartwells, governing board members, and Ms. Wagner. Reading is the most important part of the day at Echo Canyon School. To recognize an outstanding achievement in this regard and tell you about a remarkable experience of one of its students recently, I'd like to invite up third grader Miles Rogers, his teacher Suzanne Strom, and Principal Kat Hughes to the podium to join me. Last fall, Ms. Strom learned from a friend about a reading program, particularly for Title I schools, with an opportunity to donate 1,000 books to a community organization. Ms. Strom applied for the program, and her classroom was one of 100 chosen nationwide to be named Scholastic Super Reader Classroom, as was the 6th grade classroom of teacher Angie Chastney. The school had chosen Valley Wise Health Foundation's Library Family Learning Center to receive the 1,000 books. But wait, there's more. Ms. Strom was also asked to nominate one of her students as the Scholastic Super Reader. And guess who it was? Yes, it was. That would be Mr. Miles Rogers, who's standing to the left of me. Miles was one of the students nationwide who got to meet virtually with author J.K. Rowling of Harry Potter fame, all the way from United Kingdom. All the way from somewhere. Edinburgh. Not only did they get to ask questions about their latest work, the Christmas pig, and I think we have a prop, but they got to hear her read the book and tell her what their favorite part was, having already read it ahead of time. What a thrill they must have been to speak to her. Right, Miles? Okay. Miles, we all know her as J.K. Rowling. I hear you have a nickname for her.
Joe.
Joe. You want to tell us why you call her Joe? Here.
That's just what the people who did it started calling her, so I just thought that was a cool nickname, so I started calling her that.
Nice job. So I don't think the rest of us could get away with calling her Joe. And now I broke the mic. This is a good night. You can hold this for me. And just pretend. All right. Further, Miss Rowling and Scholastic Books have donated another 1,000 books, this time to Echo Canyon itself, which will be shared with all of Echo Canyon's Jaguar student body. To further commemorate these events, please accept these SUSD recognition coins from the district to remember this remarkable experience. Congratulations. My mic back is back. The guys in technology are really thrilled with me right at this moment. Sorry, guys.
I think it's the curse of 2222.
Okay, so CTE month. Part of offering our students a world-class, future-focused education is giving them the tools and the opportunity to learn about real-world occupations now before they leave SUSD and ready them for post-secondary careers right out of high school or for further formal education. More than 2,200 SUS students are enrolled in CTE programs, career and technical education, and another 200 or so are enrolled in EVEN, the East Valley Institute of Technology in Mesa. Joining me now is SUSD CTE Director, Erin Scher, and she's going to tell you why February is so special in the CTE world.
Good evening, President Sanowski, Vice President Hartwells, Dr. Menzel, members of the board, and Ms. Wagner. February is Career and Technical Education Month, and I'd first like to take a moment to recognize and thank our CTE teachers that work diligently with our students every day. Career and Technical Education is an educational opportunity that provides learners with the knowledge and skills they need to be prepared for college and careers. Through CTE, students gain real-world skills to pursue a career they are passionate about. We offer 16 CTE programs among our 5 high schools. Programs include engineering, information technology, biotechnology, healthcare, business, culinary and hospitality, criminology, and a variety of digital and media communication pathways. Most CTE programs offer dual enrollment, and many programs lead to industry-recognized certifications where students can enhance their resume with credentials the workplace is seeking in an entry-level employee. CTE is where academics meet practice. For example, a student wishing to pursue a medical profession may want to consider a certified nursing assistant license, where they can gain valuable, hands-on, direct patient care while pursuing their education. This truly puts students at a competitive advantage over their peers with no direct experience. As colleges have moved to a more holistic approach to admittance, they want to see and understand what students are experiencing and contributing outside the academic environment. It's a pleasure to honor a few of our outstanding CTE students this evening with the help of their high school instructors and counselors. First, Susan Lindberg from Saguaro High School will introduce her award-winning engineer students, followed by Desert Mountain counselor Michelle Okun to honor our Presidential Scholar finalist, one of those earning within CTE.
Good evening, President Sanowski, Vice President Hartwells, Governing Board members, Dr. Menzel, Ms. Wagner. I'd like to introduce 4 of our amazing Saguaro High School CTE Engineering 2 students. Donovan Grant, who's a senior, Noah Shoup, who is a sophomore, Owen Barker, who is a sophomore, and Brody Cladis, who's also a sophomore. They started the year working with the EPICS program through ASU's engineering school. EPICS is a national program where teams design, build, and deploy systems to solve engineering-based problems in the community. They designed a device for a nonverbal 5-year-old for the Makers of Change Assistive Technology Challenge, and they won first place in the hardware level 1. And that was out of 100 teams across the state. They then participated in the Real World Design Challenge, which is an annual competition where the students address a challenge that confronts the nation's leading industries. They were tasked to make a drone that could deliver a package autonomously. They designed their drone on SolidWorks, learned how to use the SolidWorks programs that tested the engines, the airflow for their drone, and they won first in the state. So now they are headed to the Real World Design Challenge National International Competition in Washington, D.C., which is virtual this year. They're working diligently on revisions to make their drone more efficient and are excited to present to the judges. The winners will each win a $50,000 scholarship to Embry-Riddle. And Donovan is the most excited about that because he's going to Embry-Riddle next year. So they present at the end of April, so watch out, we may be back.
Before you leave, the coins, the mint. Please accept these challenge coins on behalf of the Scottsdale School District to remember this excellent. Congratulations. Congratulations. And of course, for Miss Lindbergh. I think you got to go. Next up, I want to introduce you to two of SUSD's 3 candidates for the 2022 U.S. Presidential Scholarship. Aya Kasser and JT Yen are both seniors at Desert Mountain High School, and they're joined this evening by Desert Mountain guidance counselor and school robotics coach, Michelle Oken. Our third candidate, Kyle Odin from Chaparral High School, was not able to join us this evening. The U.S. Presidential Scholars Program was established in 1964 by executive order of President Lyndon Johnson to recognize and honor some of our nation's most distinguished graduating high school seniors. In 1979, the program was extended to recognize students who demonstrate exceptional talent in the visual, creative, and performing arts. And in 2015, the program was again extended to recognize students who demonstrate ability and accomplishment in career and technical education fields. Aya is one of the 5 Arizona students to be nominated for this recognition by State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Kathy Hoffman. Each year, up to 161 students are named Presidential Scholars, one of the nation's highest honors for high school student, from a group numbering about 4,000. The number is now down to about 650, and Aya and JT are still in it. Scores on SAT and ACT are usually used initially to identify these students, and they take it from there by completing an exhaustive invitation-only application in which they must detail their leadership and service activities to their school and to their community, as well as a comprehensive essay about themselves. The program does not offer financial award. It is one of prestige and, as you will hear from our next speaker, ongoing creative connection that continues to influence their educational pursuits. I'd like to welcome up Mrs. Oken.
Thank you, Dr. Zachos. So Ava, come on up here. This is Ava Kasser. Ava wants to attend Northwestern University, and she wants to pursue a degree in economics with a minor in philosophy, where she will go into business and law in the future. She's very involved at Desert Mountain High School campus, where she can notably be seen in many extracurricular activities. Outside of school, she is an avid volunteer who strives to assist veterans and gets many awards in that area too. We are so proud of everything you've accomplished at Desert Mountain, and you're amazing, Ava. Thank you. This is Jatan Young, who's also known as JT. JT aims to go to Columbia University in the fall, and his ambition in life is to become a Supreme Court justice. Yeah. He's involved in Desert Mountain Band and IB program, along with participating in many extracurricular activities on our campus. He's an ambitious off-campus as he is on campus. He focuses on acclimating refugees with emotional support and physical supplies. DM and SUSD wish both of you guys the best of luck in the next step of this process. We're rooting for you both and know you guys will have the brightest futures, and we can't wait to see where you guys go. Thank you.
And I'd like to offer our challenge coin to these 2 exceptional students. You stay up here, Ms. Oken. So, Miss Oaken's eldest son, Jake, was the National CTE Presidential Scholar, and yes, you know him as our president-elect of the Student Advisory Board. Come on up. What's that?
No, that's my older son.
Oh, shoot, I thought it was you, buddy. Okay, well, the other one. I'm really knocking it out of the park tonight. The oldest son, which you met a couple of years ago, was the National CTE Presidential Scholar 2 years ago, and is here to tell us a little bit about what it means and the impact of being named a U.S. Presidential Scholarship.
But he's not. No, he's not.
He didn't come?
No.
Oh,
I don't know, I was supposed to invite him, but no.
okay.
Next time.
We still congratulate him. Thank you, Dr. Menzel. I think you like the podium.
Thank you, Dr.
back
Sackos.
for now.
We appreciate your effort tonight. We do have one more celebration, but we're not going to let Dr. Sackos introduce it. So back in January, the governing board approved Phase 2 of our strategic planning process, and tonight we have many members of the Phase 2 strategic planning design team with us, and I'd like to invite you to come to the podium. President Sanowski is going to join you there. We want to recognize you for your work. Your names are displayed on the board. If you see your name up there and you're in the audience, then we will call you if you don't come up. So I'm going to start calling names. Oh, this is a slow-moving crowd. And Dr. Connie Cam, who facilitated the strategic planning process, is also here with us this evening. I'd like to ask Dr. Cam to come up. What many of you may not know is that this group of people spent a lot of time together over many months working on fleshing out the Phase 2 part of our strategic plan, where we talked about our goals and commitments as a district. Tonight we celebrated some pretty amazing students, and every time we get a chance to do that, I'm moved, because we have phenomenal things going on in our district. Yet we know we can be even better than we are now. And the people standing in front of you here have contributed in significant ways to Phase 2 of our strategic planning process, which really creates the framing for where we're going as a district. So tonight we want to publicly thank you for all of your time, your effort, your contribution. I can personally attest to the fact that each one of these individuals came and brought their creativity, they spoke their truth, they engaged in some robust dialogue, leading us to the point where we are. And before we give the coins, I'd like to ask Dr. Cam if she has any final words she'd like to say.
I wasn't planning this, but I never hesitate to speak when given a microphone. And I'll keep it very short. These team members were extraordinary. We spent hours together through the summer, and when they turned in words and we thought maybe not up to what we wanted them to be, we did and redid and redid, and they stayed with us, and it was an exhausting process, and I'm very proud to say that we have arrived now at the vision, the mission, the values, and the strategic goals, and we're very pleased. I'm proud of each of you, and it's been a huge pleasure to work with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cam. A district is made up of community members who are committed to a common goal of advancing achievement for our students, and these people typify the quality of and caliber of individuals we have within our school district, and some even dressed up for the occasion, so thank you so much. I would be remiss if I didn't also point out that Cabinet has continued to serve on the strategic planning design process, and I appreciate their support. I just didn't want to give them the microphone and let them break the podium again, so. Yep. Our marketing team likes to get photos after all of the presentations.
And that was fun. And now we move on to agenda item 4, Superintendents Comments.
Thank you, President Sanowski and members of the governing board. We have a long agenda tonight, and so I'm going to be brief in my comments. I think the celebrations were fantastic. There's one other thing that we can be grateful for this evening, and that is yesterday the Arizona Senate finally did what they, I would argue, should have done a long time ago and passed the override of the aggregate expenditure limit. So, we've spent... We spent time talking about how important this was, not only to our district, but districts across the state. The House acted last week, the Senate acted this week, and while not every area legislator voted to support it, there were enough to get the two-thirds necessary in both the House and the Senate, and I want to focus on celebrating those individuals in our legislature that recognize that honoring their commitment to our schools and the budget that was passed last year was the right thing to do for Arizona students, and so I'm truly grateful for that. The other thing that I would like to highlight is we're not done yet with the work. And Senate President Fan, in her comment after the Senate acted, indicated that this is not a singular problem, that it's going to recur over time, and that it's incumbent on this current legislature to enact a bipartisan solution to addressing the aggregate expenditure limit to bring it into the 21st century. And so it's my hope that we'll continue to do the work in partnership with elected officials to put a permanent fix in place so school districts don't have to get to March every year wondering whether or not the budget that was promised us in the prior June is going to be something we can rely on. So I'm grateful that we don't have to make a $27 million budget reduction heading into next year, and hopeful that people will put aside partisan differences to do what's right for Arizona students in creating a permanent fix. With that, I'll conclude my comments.
Thank you, Dr. Menzel, and the work is really important, and I want to thank you for taking a lead on that and sharing out information to our community. It was noted by other communities around our state, and that's leadership, so thank you. Appreciate that. And we now move on to the public comment portion of our meeting. Student advisory. Oh, yes, thank you. We have student advisory. Dr. Menzel, back to you.
Well, tonight we do have our student advisory board, and of course this is always a highlight of our evening. And I was going to invite Dr. Sakos up to introduce the student advisory board, but we won't do that. I'm going to ask Trex and Zach and whoever else you want to bring up. They have been working really hard, and I have to say, I was able to engage with the student advisory board during my transition coming into the district, and then last year, in my first year. This group of young people have really taken it to the next level. They've got and formed committees. They're doing deep level work, and I think you're going to really appreciate hearing what they have to share tonight. Thank you.
I won't take this off. Hello, President Sadowski and board members and Dr. Menzel. Tonight we're going to talk about, we have a couple updates. Sorry. Perfect. We have a couple updates for our teen town hall that'll be led by Zoe, and in our SAB committee updates, we'll talk about things that we'll want to work with on the district and new ideas. With the committees, we met with the respective representatives from each one and got a discussion with each one. Now with Zoe.
Hello, board members and Dr. Menzel. Thank you for having me here tonight. Thank you. Teen Town Hall is an opportunity for students to ask Student Advisory Board and other board members questions regarding SUSD policies and campus efforts and any other concerns that the students may have. Teen Town Hall is planned and administered by the Student Advisory Board, and will be hosted separately for each school, with the dates this year ranging from March to May. We're expecting to have about 2 events per school, one during the school day and one either after school or during the weekend, to allow for other students to come and get a diverse population. For the Teen Town Hall during the day, we are working to have a setup where some students are in an auditorium and listening live, and some are in the classroom having it live streamed, similar to how we had Voices. For the in-person students in the auditorium, we will use the note cards as a way to ask questions and everything, but we will use Google Forms for those live streaming in classrooms so that every student has a voice and every concern can be voiced. Teen Town Hall provides feedback to the school and the district to better the needs of individual students and address the concerns and questions that come up in the conversation. Teen Town Hall not only allows students to better understand the SUSD's efforts, their great efforts and their education, but it also allows issues to be brought to the SUSD officials' attention. We would like to invite SUSD board members, along with our principals and SROs and counselors, to be present to give input and note any concerns that the students may have. With that, I'd like to invite Gabrielle Chen.
Good evening, Governing Board, Dr. Menzel. There we go. Okay. My name is Gabriella Chen. I'm a senior at Desert Mountain High School, and I am the co-chair of the Code of Conduct Committee on the SAB. So last meeting, we talked with Ms. Cron about the dress code, specifically the language and the structure of it. She actually brought a proposal from, I believe, Paradise Valley, which was a restructuring of it, which would consist of 3 parts. A must-wear section, which would consist of basic items like shoes, tops, bottoms, things like that. And then a second section of a may wear, so things that students are allowed to wear. And then a third section, which is absolutely they cannot wear those things. That would be obscenities, drug references, things like that, that we wouldn't allow at school. Talking more about the language of the dress code, we want to eliminate sort of confusion and vagueness that's involved in that, and we wanted to clear that up by offering more concise and clear language that's more to the point. We wanted to enhance our focus on safety and promoting individualism as well, and we also want to, I guess, stray away from language such as distracting or dress for success, because we, as a committee, acknowledge that there are different interpretations of what that looks like. Also with that, we talked about restorative practices in terms of punishment and consequencing. We wanted to implement new education and support systems for students who offend or violate parts of the Code of Conduct. Instead of just punishment, we wanted to provide an educational opportunity for students to learn from these behaviors and change them moving forward. And then with prevention programming, we wanted to implement new programs perhaps in middle school to start early with introducing the fact that there are consequences and health risks involved with certain violations of the Code of Conduct. And one of the programs that came to mind was the Not My Kid. I know that we already partner with them, and they give talks about these things to students, so I feel like implementing those in middle schools, we as a committee discussed that, and we thought that might be beneficial for students to learn. I think with that, I'm going to pass it over to Victoria Hill for the College and Career Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Governing Board and Dr. Menzel. My name is Victoria Hill, and I'm a sophomore at Desert Mountain High School, and tonight I'm representing the College and Career Committee. In a discussion in our last Student Advisory Board meeting with Ms. Scher, the director of the CTE, we discussed how we've reached an overarching theme that we need to really educate our students about their opportunities and push them to be more academically or reach academic ambition. In coalition with this, we realized that there were cultural, racial, and economic disparities within the system. For example, a child whose parents didn't go to college or went to college in another country doesn't know that they need to take honors courses, or they don't know that they need to participate in extracurricular activities despite their capabilities. To help solve these problems, we want to prioritize 8th grade outreach on high school options. This could be seniors talking to 8th graders about what their 4-year plan looks like, how picking your freshman courses can really affect you in the long run, and really educate them on their opportunities and really show them what the outcome is, what that last senior year and how this is going to look on your college applications. Furthermore, really increasing scholarship awareness and ACT prep opportunities to ensure that our students are really college ready and ready for life. Okay, now I'm handing it over to Zach Oken for the Communications Committee.
Good evening, members of the board, Superintendent Menzel. My name is Zach Oken. I'm the president-elect of the Students Advisory Board, and I'm a junior at Desert Mountain High School. So basically, today I'll be talking to you about communication. So basically, communication is one of the cornerstones of all the committees and most district things that we do. So one of the things we wanted to do was address communication directly with students. And through this, we wanted to make sure we had communication on a district-to-student level and a school-to-student level, and also a district-to-school level. So we wanted to make sure that students could be able to hear their community communication, they could hear their school communication, their district communication, so that way they were able to understand everything that's going on around them. So one of the ways we were looking to do this was through student-friendly mediums and platforms. So one of the ways we're doing this right now is we do have an Instagram set up through the Student Advisory Board, and we're looking at creating a student hub sort of situation where students are able to see everything going on around them, so they're able to get involved and find out what's going on and learn and help and lend a hand in different aspects and different programs going through the district. So with that, I'd like to hand it off to Trex to talk about technology. Thank you.
We worked with Dr. Watts, talking about the technology and seeing what we could do with our blocked websites. So we learned about how every Tuesday they go through the websites and for teachers requesting them to get them approved. And so what we noticed is teachers sometimes do set up their lesson plan at home, and then they don't realize the website is banned when they get to school. So what we are now going to try to work on with through the Student Advisory Board is making communications to teachers, trying to keep them proactive about that so we can have those lesson plans in there and also have them be able to teach with those websites. Also, we talked about printer access. When we talked about this, we were trying to figure out ways to make our printer system more efficient. For Arcadia, for example, we have the library to go to get our printer or use the printer, but the start of the computer takes 15 minutes. So we're trying to figure out more efficient ways to do that, save time for students, and make it more effective. With devices, we talked about how devices are right now with the district and how we can the Student Advisory Board may be able to beta test any devices that are given to the students before they're released, so we can then talk about them and tell what we like about them and dislike about them. And for that is the end. And any questions?
Do any of the board members have any questions or comments they'd like to make at this time? Board Member Beckman.
Just always, thank you. Some of these little things like the printer access and things, do we get a follow-up on the solutions that come out of these discussions?
Yes, we can do that. We'll work with Dr. Watt and team to share what the outcome is of that.
Okay. I mean, they're presented to us, so we'd kind of like to know that they got solved. Thank you so much. You all did a fantastic job.
Thank you.
Right. And I note that Vice President Dr. Hart-Wells is in the cloud with us right now. Dr. Hart-Wells, do you have any comments or questions for this fine group of leaders?
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. All right, well done, everyone. Excellent presentation. I want to just add your comments on the career, the CTE aspects. I visited with Eva a couple of weeks ago, the board member, and had an opportunity to go through some of their new buildings and expansions of their programs. So I think that's a timely comment and discussion, and appreciate that you've raised it. It reconciles with the conversation I had with some of their leadership team a few weeks ago.
Thank you, Dr. Hart-Wells. Any other comments? Board Member Greenberg.
I appreciate the comments on the dress code changes and bringing those up to temporary times and avoiding problematic language. In terms of restorative justice on that and other issues, has the Student Advisory Board looked into various alternatives for restorative justice, what those might be like? Are you looking to do, say, a student court system? Do you have any ideas there? Is it very preliminary?
We're still talking with Ms. Kwan about
Come up here.
about specifically looking into different programs to address those things. I know that Ms. Cron said that she would discuss with her committee first and then bring back whatever ideas that they might be proposing. And then, I mean, if anybody has any suggestions, we'd definitely be open to hearing those. And because I know Team Court is also a viable option that we have available through Desert Mountain, but that would go through the Maricopa County court system as well.
Right. Yeah, no, I think certainly I think restorative justice programs, even for infractions in our district, like dress code violations or other types of misconduct, I think is certainly the right way forward, and I'm glad that you've brought it to us. So good work. If we can support you in any way, please let us know.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Board Member Greenberg. I would just like to add, Zoe, Gabriella, Victoria, Zach, and Trex, I am so appreciative of you taking on this extra work as busy students and very engaged students. This is very meaningful to us as a district because you are the reason why we all exist. So thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you.
Now with that, we will move on to our public comment section of the governing board meeting. And I'd like to note, citizens attending and/or participating in Scottsdale Unified School District meetings, either in person, virtually, or telephonically, are required to observe the same rules of order and decorum applicable to members of the governing board and staff. Unauthorized remarks or demonstrations from members of the audience, yells, outbursts, and/or other disruptions are not permitted. Members of the public are not allowed to approach the dais at any time while the governing board meeting is in session without express permission from the governing board president. Do we have all the cards? Okay. And we have 11 cards this evening. So each will get 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The clock has been set. I will call each person up, and I will say who's following. So please be ready, if you're following, to come up and address the governing board. And our first speaker is Janet Larkin.
Good evening. Superintendent Menzel, President Cianowski. I'm Janet Larkin. I'm a retired school teacher from Scottsdale, and my 3 grown children have gone through the schools here. I'm here representing the American Association of University Women, the Scottsdale branch, AAUW. And we support, this is a statement that we have come here to present. We support a strong system of public education charged with the responsibility to deliver curriculum that is steeped in fairness, equity, diversity, inclusivity, regardless of the student's socioeconomic status, beliefs, cultural, or religious affiliations. AAUW Scottsdale advocates for equitable funding for access to quality K-12 public education. AAUW Scottsdale commends the board, leadership, teachers, staff, and students for their efforts over the past months to keep our schools safe through policies, procedures to protect and resist infection with the severe COVID-19. The challenge to public health as the pandemic emerged and progressed has been unprecedented in our experience. We appreciate the heroic efforts to ensure our students are protected while pursuing their academic goals. AAUW Scottsdale applauds curriculum that presents the unvarnished history of our country and the world, so as to empower our children to avoid mistakes of the past. Thank you for working with our students to resist the taunts of bullies, to seek, honor, and cherish the truth while rejecting lies, to recognize truth from fiction. Again, thank you for your ongoing efforts to deliver an equitable standard of education to our children, to support our families, to model, teach, and to practice civility with our students and our community.
Thank you, Janet. Up next is Jennifer Flores. Followed by Jennifer is Elizabeth Halverson. If you could please, when you approach the dais or the podium, if you can please state your name, and then we'll know to hit the clock to start it, okay?
All right, my name is Jennifer Flores. Good evening, President Sinowski, governing board members, Dr. Menzel and Gladys. My name is Jennifer Flores. I have 2 adorable kids at Pueblo Elementary. I'm currently the PTO president at Pueblo, and wanted to speak tonight on how thankful we are as a community of the work of the Pueblo Rebuild Committee, which you'll hear about tonight. All the members volunteered their time to provide insight that was important to help inform the presentation that you'll see tonight. On behalf of PTO, I also want to appreciate Principal Hammond, who is incredible and amazing amazing. She spent countless hours meeting with architects to explain all the great things happening at Pueblo and all the unique challenges that we also have. So thank you, Ms. Hammond. Also, thank you to the architects for their listening and input of the committee. Really, really great conversations. We had conversations about the wind, solar, flood, like everything from A to Z, detailed in lots and lots of detail, and discussions, and just great, great work that they did. Also want to thank Dennis Rayler for all his hard work. Man, he has worked hours and hours on all of these rebuilds, and we really, really appreciate him. His expertise is definitely something that we've noticed throughout the meetings, and we thank him. Also, board members and Dr. Menzel, thank you for your time to listen to us and all our emails, and thank you for your support of all the educational needs of our students of SUSD. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is Elizabeth Halverson, followed by Amy Bean.
My name is Elizabeth Halverson. Good evening, President Sanowski, Vice President Hartwells, governing board members, Dr. Menzel, and Ms. Wagner. My name is Elizabeth Halverson. I'm a graduate of Coronado High School, a community member, a teacher at Arcadia, and the mother of 3 students who go to Pueblo. I have a 4th grader, a 2nd grader, and a preschooler. I'm here tonight to talk about the rebuild of Pueblo Elementary School. I had never originally thought my kids would go to Pueblo. Our home school is Pima. But when my daughters were very young, they attended the early childhood campus at Oak. That program was then shut down and relocated to Pueblo. My oldest started at Pueblo when she was 2 years old. When it came time for her to go to kindergarten, I went to the information nights at Pima, Pueblo, and Hohokam, where I had gone to school. My husband and I decided to have her start kindergarten at Pueblo, figuring if we did not like it, moving forward, we could always pull her out and change schools, but we could never enroll elsewhere and then go to Pueblo. I am thankful that ECC was closed and relocated because my children are learning both Spanish and English and are doing very well. The staff at Pueblo is exceptional, and the families at Pueblo are amazing. My daughter has friends who she has been with at the school since the age of 2. Our teachers and our students deserve a school that is A+ like they are. That is one reason why I have been sitting on the Pueblo Visioning Committee. I know the amount of time students and teachers spend in their school building during a school year. The Pueblo Visioning Committee has spent numerous hours meeting and talking about whether our schools should be remodeled or rebuilt, and also discussing what we would like to see. I am thankful to Mr. Rayler, Mrs. Hammond, and the team at BWS Architects for all of the time they have put into meeting with us and without us to bring the presentation together for all of you tonight. I'm also excited for the new school at Pueblo that will educate future generations. Keeping our students at their school site while the rebuild is going on is ideal. Since our school is a school of choice, many families drive their kids to campus, which means the parking lot is a nightmare. One of our first activities as a committee was to talk about things that needed to be improved. The number one answer was parking in the parking lot. Our visioning committee discussed many things, from orientation of the buildings, to the flooding of campus when it rains, to indoor-outdoor classroom access, and even if we should do a 1-story or 2-story building. I think the plan that you see tonight will be a positive one for our students, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Amy Bean is up, followed by Amy Carney.
My name is Amy Bean. Good evening. Thank you for having me again. At the risk of beating a dead horse, I just want to really encourage you in the policy changes that are being considered tonight, that the board has an obligation to the people who elected you and to the community. And I do have concerns that the policy language removes that obligation. It removes the ability of the people who have chosen the board to have some say over that. And again, I wanted to read something that the Arizona School Board Association posted in November of 2020 that says it defines school boards as instruments through which the residents of a school district exercise democratic control over the public schools in their community. I just think that's a very important fact about how our school boards and schools operate. And tonight was amazing, by the way. It was one of the best board meetings I've been at. The kids are amazing. The teachers are amazing. I was really impressed. So thank you.
Thank you. Amy Carney, followed by Corinne Warner.
Good evening, Dr. Menzel, board members. I'm Amy Carney, and I'm a proud Cherokee and Desert Canyon Middle School parent. I'm just wondering if you realize that only 8% of Coronado High School students passed the state math test in 2021. I find it unfathomable that you're focusing on rewriting board policies to shut out your community rather than prioritizing helping our students. You say you care about educating our students, yet your actions speak otherwise. Only 12% of Coronado students, whose campus we're actually on tonight, passed the state ELA test in 2021, and only 35% of students at Chaparral, where 4 of my kids recently graduated, passed the same test, but I see nothing about your plan to address this travesty on the meeting agenda. You were elected by the community to serve as representatives of the public. You are supposed to be a champion of the community and work to make sure the needs and desires of the public are brought to life. Instead, the proposed rewrite of Policy BA that you're voting to approve today strikes the language saying that the governing board is responsible to the people of the district and therefore should be aware of opinions and attitudes in the community and of identified district needs. It's concerning that you're also considering removing the language as representatives of the people who own and support the schools. The board accepts the responsibility to identify community attitudes and opinions and district needs and to require short and long-range strategies that are responsive within the budgetary limitations of the district. It's frustrating to watch elected officials essentially erase the responsibility to the electorate by changing policy language. The school board is supposed to represent the community's voice in public education. Board members should listen to the ideas of the people in the community, school staff, and students. The board should demonstrate that an atmosphere of collaboration and respect is the most conducive environment for providing the best education for children in the community. If you're really interested in providing our students the world-class education you say you want to, why is time spent on rewriting and discussing board policies instead of your plan to raise academic achievement in our district? Are you unaware that the most overwhelming key to a child's success in school is the positive involvement of parents? Why in the world would the district want to create a wedge with their most important stakeholders? I'm here tonight to ask each of you to refrain from these policy revisions that will only further the divide and distrust of this board. Please refocus your efforts on strengthening the educational experience and outcomes for the students of Scottsdale Unified. Thank you.
Up now is Corinne Warner, followed by Travis Thomas.
Good evening. We have some extraordinary students and schools here in Scottsdale. Yet, however, out of the 5 high schools in Scottsdale, not one has half of their students proficient in math or English. So that's less than half of the students are proficient. As recent as in 2021, only 8% of 10th grade students at Coronado High School were proficient in math, and at Desert Mountain, which is the highest one, was 49%. In ELA, it was 12% at Coronado, 47% at Desert Mountain. That means that not a single high school in the district has half of their 10th grade students proficient in math. I'd say the board is letting our students down and missing the mark. Consider the amount of time this board has spent, even as recently as the last meeting, and will be spending today on the debates of unnecessary policy changes. Agenda items, and of course the board retreat last fall. How much of our taxpayer dollars are going to wasteful spending that has nothing to do with academic excellence or achievement? I take you back to the board retreat last fall. It was right around 4 hours, and any mention of academic achievement as a measure was shot down. I was there. I witnessed it. Why is that? Why is academic achievement pushed to the bottom? I noticed today the strategic design team was recognized, and they devoted a lot of time to create what's over there. And in the mission, vision, and values, there is not a mention of achievement or success. Connie Cam received $73,500 of our taxpayer monies, and no mention of academic achievement or success. Our kids are not learning when they are spending time taking surveys or doing ridiculous propaganda supplemental assignments. Our students are the future of our country, future leaders, business owners, medical workers, grocery store workers, and so on. We must do better and ensure that all students are graduating at grade level or above so that they can secure meaningful employment, vocational schools, or college or universities. So I ask you to take this into account as you move forward as a board and be responsible for the success of our students. Thank you.
Travis Thomas, followed by Justin Flory.
Good evening. Travis Thomas. Good evening and thank you. My name is Travis Thomas. I'm a Pueblo, Mojave, and Saguaro graduate. I'm a neighbor of Pueblo. I'm a spouse of a Pueblo teacher. I'm a Pueblo Rebuild Vision Committee member, but most importantly, I'm a parent of a third grader at Pueblo. I'm here to speak of the thorough inclusive process that SUSD, BWS architects, Dennis Railer, and Principal Hummon have taken throughout this year and last spring with the rebuild. Since being selected as a Vision Committee member, I feel my voice and the voices of the teachers in the community have been listened to and taken seriously. From the community meeting at Pueblo in October 21st and the February 16th, as well as multiple newspaper articles and mailers, we have been informed of this process since the beginning. Pueblo, if you're not familiar, has a lot of unique features about the site, from parking as well as drainage and flow. So it is very challenging to rebuild that school. But BWS architects and Dennis have been upfront about creating solutions for those challenges as well. BWS has sought input from the committee to understand what makes Pueblo special. During the design process, the committee was able to put on paper different building modules, and we were able to manipulate those around the property. After much time, the committee selected the north field for many reasons. This will allow for more traffic flow off of 82nd Street, creating longer car lines, allow more pickup lanes, and more secure and safe property. It'll allow the south field to be used for evening school events as well as practices and weekend activities as it is currently used. Parking for those activities will be closer to the field, away from homes. Parents and spectators will not need to go through or go around the campus. Construction can take place behind the school grounds as well. With construction, there'll be many challenges, some inconvenient to the neighbors, but the decision was made to build on the north field for the long-term benefits of the safety, the financial constraints of drainage and slope issues, and most importantly, the committee felt it would be most beneficial to the student academic success. Placing it on the north property, BWS was able to create a pathway, BWS was able to design classroom buildings to be continuous, creating a pathway interior for students to travel. The hallways connect the school from pre-K on the east to the 5th grade on the west, setting up a metaphor that Pueblo students are connected. A very important issue that was brought up last spring was the idea to relocate and, relocate the campus while the rebuild happens, and we
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Appreciate your input. Up now is Justin Flory, followed by Becky Williams.
Justin Flory. So good evening to President Sanowski, members of the board, and Dr. Menzel. My name's Justin Flory, and I'm a proud parent of 2 adorable children at Pueblo Elementary School. And I want to thank you for your support and leadership over these last challenging years that we've had with COVID and also rebuilding all of our schools. I'm also the president of the Pueblo Dads Club. Yes, we have a Dads Club. And one of our mission is to really build community. And I think we have an outstanding community at Pueblo, and that complements the amazing teachers and staff that we have, as well as the amazing dual language program, which makes us so special. And I had the great privilege of going to the rebuild meeting last week and seeing some of the amazing and creative designs that the team came up with, and I'm extremely grateful for all the work that people on the committee put in and the architects, and seeing what a 21st century learning environment would look like for the community, and we're just really excited about that while addressing some of the challenges that we face at our site. And I was also pleased to hear that all the consideration that went into for all of the homeowners that were in that area in terms of maybe a slightly more costly but lower profile design, lower intensity lighting, walls to hide the mechanical equipment and sound, moving noisy activities that were currently right behind the homes to farther away from the homes. Obviously, the safety issues that you've heard about before as a primary has been addressed there. And I also want to just thank you for your continued support for our rebuild process and encourage you to continue so we can proceed without delay to the detailed design where we can see some of these amazing collaborative spaces and what the classrooms look like. We're just really excited to see that. So thank you so much for all your support.
Thank you. Up now is Becky Williams, followed by Valerie Shannon.
I'm Becky Williams. Good evening, Dr. Menzel, President Sanowski, Vice President Hart-Wells, members of the Governing Board, and Ms. Wagner. As I said, I'm Becky Williams. I'm a parent of students at Saguaro High School. I'm a teacher at Mojave Middle School, and I'm honored to serve as the elected president of the Scottsdale Education Association. I would like to take a moment to echo Dr. Menzel's measured celebration of yesterday's Senate vote to override the AEL for this school year. The success of this vote is owed to continued pressure put on our legislators by countless supporters of public education relentlessly advocating. For my own children, for my students, and my colleagues, I am grateful for your advocacy. Educators from across the valley, including a contingency from SUSD, spent their day off yesterday down at the Capitol to show our support of overriding the AEL. And many were in the gallery when the vote was taken. Imagine how disheartening to hear our own senator from Scottsdale standing on the very floor from which she purports to represent her constituents, turn to the guests in the gallery and call them educational terrorists who have held students hostage for the past 2 years. What I know about the past 2 years is that educators and school staff have done more to adapt and meet the needs of their students than anyone imagined would ever be necessary when we entered the profession. We have continuously pivoted amid the evolving circumstances of the pandemic and ever-changing expectations, and we're still here. Our students deserved a yes vote delivered with decorum from our senator. I hope that our dedicated and talented professionals receive the message that their hard work is valued and appreciated, both by the fact that a majority of legislators agreed to fund what they had already allocated so that we may finish this school year strong with our students, and through the actions of this board. We have much work to do to ensure that we are not mired in this AEL situation next year. I am ready to continue this work alongside all of you who advocate for the public schools that our students deserve. And because I still have time left, I would like to add my Viva Pueblo to this conversation. My oldest student began there 12 years ago, and I also taught there for my first 5 years in Scottsdale. And I feel like finally the amazing community and culture and programming at Pueblo is going to be reflected in a visionary learning space for their students.
Thank you. Up next is Valerie Shannon, followed by Lynn Thackwell.
Good evening, Governing Board, Dr. Menzel. My name is Valerie Shannon. I'm a parent of 3, 2 currently enrolled in SUSD, another has already graduated college. My husband and I moved to this community over 10 years ago. We chose to live here out of the entire country because of the values of the community. They reflected our own. Those values should be reflected in our public schools. There are several policy revisions on the agenda for tonight, a couple of which in particular really beg the question, what is the role of a school board as elected representatives of our community? The tradition of public schools governed by elected lay citizens is uniquely American and dates back to the 17th century. The townspeople gave elected representatives the responsibility for handling school affairs. In 1826, townspeople created the official beginning of the school board, operating as the governing body for the public schools, separate from that of a city or town. These school boards were founded on the belief that citizens should play a dominant role in determining how children in a community are educated. As a democratically elected body intended to represent the interests of the community on public education issues, the local school board has been a symbol of local control of public education for nearly 200 years. The proposed changes to policies BA and BBA, on which you are all set to vote tonight, remove all reference to that local control. They also remove all reference to the will of the people. Despite what proposed policy BA would like to convey, a governing board's responsibility is to the people of the district, and therefore, it should be responsive to the opinions and attitudes in the community from which each of you was elected. That is all proposed to be eliminated tonight. Despite what proposed policy BBA would like to convey, the purpose of the school board is not to act as general agent of the state. It is and has always been to regard the will of the people of the district in the matter of public education. That is also proposed to be eliminated tonight. You are all elected representatives of the people who own and support the schools. Although we live in a representative democracy, this does not give the board a mandate to unilaterally act on all issues as an agent of the state. You must accept the responsibility to identify and represent community, attitudes, and opinions. Unfortunately, the impetus for these changes appears to be a contempt with the opinions of the community. In particular, Mr. Greenberg appears to have adopted a posture of reacting to these criticisms with a forceful strike of the pen rather than allowing the board to take a leadership role that could result in effective collaboration, an attempt at reunification, and a building of trust within this community. The last thing we read right now, we need is an alarming democratic void at the heart of our school district. Please vote no on the approval of
Now is Lynn Thackwell. Lynn Thackwell. Is Lynn present? Am I saying her name right? No, not here. Going once, going twice. All right, no Lynn. That concludes our public comment section of tonight's meeting. Do any of the governing board members have any input or response to public comment that they'd like to make? Seeing none? All right, we will move on to our information and discussion items. That is section 7 of our agenda, and I'd like Dr. Menzel to introduce our presenters this evening.
Thank you, President Sanowski and members of the governing board. I'm going to invite Shannon Crozier up to the podium. Each year at this time, we come forward to the governing board with a recommendation on salary schedules and benefits. This year is different than it's been in the past 5 because our teams have worked together through the meet and confer process with 3 associations and the team from administration to move us forward on the journey towards the recommendation that Shannon's going to review. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Shannon.
Thank you. I'm going to not touch the microphone for fear of breaking it tonight. Good evening, Board President Sanowski, Vice President Dr. Hart-Wells, members of the board, Dr. Menzel, and guests. Tonight, I have the pleasure of bringing forth a recommendation for fiscal year 22-23 salary schedules and benefits for your review. So first I want to start off by highlighting the process, and I think it's important to point out 2 key parts about this. The first one, recognizing the importance of our employees and the role we all take in engaging all students in a world-class, future-focused learning. Our strategic goals and commitments utilize goal 3.1 and 3.4 really speak to what we're talking about here tonight with the salaries and benefits. 3.1 being utilizing robust recruiting and hiring strategies, and 3.4 being support employee agency, innovation, and retention by offering a superior compensation package in an environment where employees feel valued and enjoy contributing. The second key point in this process is how this information is being brought forward and how that was developed with the 3 employee groups, what Dr. Menzel just brought up, but I'll bring it up as well, is that this is something that we did through employee groups within interest-based negotiations, and that hasn't happened in 5 years. So I also want to thank Becky Williams, Carrie Blaker, and Grace Strombras, as well as all of the participants on their teams and the district administration who worked through this process. We did training in September to learn about interest-based negotiations, and then we broke off into the separate groups in November to really start looking at this process, and the first item being salaries, since we knew this was coming up tonight. We also felt a strong sense of how do we attract and retain highly qualified, passionate, talented professionals, and I think the recommendations that we've brought forward tonight really do signal that. So with that, Our first group is the certified employees. The interest of that group was to provide a step increase, which is approximately 2%, as well as a cost of living increase. They recommended 0.7 to 1%, and so we went with the 1%, as well as a longevity stipend to recognize staff that have been here for a considerable amount of time. So based off that, we have the base increase of 1%, the step for 2, for an approximate increase of 3%. And this includes certified employees, guidance counselors, occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech language pathologists, nurses, and our psychologists. The other part of it was the longevity part. And so with this proposal, it's a COVID retention stipend from ESSER, which we did something like this last year, although this is a little bit modified from what we did in the past. This would be for the certified employees that I just mentioned. And again, it would be prorated based on FTE and paid out in 2 installments, one once the contract is signed, and the second installment being in October. It does vary depending on years of service with the district, so that addresses the longevity that they wanted to speak to with those staff. Next, we have the classified group. The interest with that was really to look at reducing the compression on the salary schedule that's taken place because of minimum wage. As minimum wage has increased, it's increased greater than the raises that we've been able to give all of our employees, which has really made it so we have a large group of employees that are all making the same dollar amount. And so we wanted to address the compression on that, increase starting rates. As we all know, it's becoming more and more difficult to hire staff, and the minimum wages or the amount of the lower wages jobs are increasing more than where we're at right now. So they wanted to address that. And then the other part of that was to add additional holidays onto the 9-month and 9-month plus 3 days work calendar, so that there was more equity between the different work calendars and the paid holidays between those calendars. So for that, they created a new salary schedule that is a tiered schedule. It starts out at $13 per hour and goes up to $35.66 per hour. It also adjusts employees based on the years of service with Scottsdale. So as we go into that tiered system, it became important to look at where would employees land and viewing that based on their years of service with Scottsdale. And again, this would provide an increase to staff of at least 3%. Some employees, based off of where they fall and increasing that salary schedule, would be more than 3%, but every classified employee would receive 3%. I will note, in the documents that were sent over, we noticed late this afternoon that there was a typo that said 2% on the classified, and it is actually a 3% at least. And then 3 additional paid holidays for the 9-month and the 9-month plus 3 workday calendars. Is it gonna go? Okay, it's not moving. Tonight is full of technology issues, like apparently, and no. Okay, next group being principals and assistant principals. And within this group, we looked at adjusting the salary ranges, adjusting salary placement to align with years of service, and then an increase of 3%, as well as reinstating the $5,000 stipend for the high school athletic directors. So for that recommendation, we have increased the base rate. Adjustments were made. They're varying between the different salary schedules, but adjustments were made basically to address some prior year adjustments and equal those out, as well as addressing the high school 11-month principals, or 11-month APs and 12-month APs, so that they have the same daily rate. So it actually means for the high school 12-month assistant principals, it's 4.25% versus 3%, because there was that larger jump to get it so that they have the same daily rate between those two. And then with that base adjustment and then a % increase to give them, again, approximately 3% for that staff. Realignment of specific individuals so that, based on years of service, so that anybody who had the same years of service is placed at the same salary range. And then the $5,000 stipend for the athletic directors. And then this next group is the non-affiliated, and this is essentially district administration who doesn't belong to a specific employee group. But we wanted to make sure, because all employees are important to the success of the district, that they were also taken care of as well. So we are recommending a salary increase of approximately 3%, which is in line with what we're doing with the other groups as well. And then in addition to that, because of the increase that have happened within classified and then changing that classified salary schedule, it made it so that the admin who are on our lowest level, which is level F, were actually making less than classified employees. And so we, to address that, we felt it would be important to eliminate letter F. It affects 3 employees, one of those employees being the security program supervisor, and because he has a supervisory role, moving him to a step H, which is where the lowest level of where other supervisors are at. So he would be in line with because of the supervisory role. The other 2 being fiscal support specialist for community education, and then we have a fiscal specialist for grants. And those 2 would move to letter G, which would be the first step now within the admin calendar. And then the last one would be cabinet, moving the car allowance benefit, which is it's considered a stipend right now, but it would be moving that into the base salary of the cabinet members. So it doesn't change, we're still taxed, there's still state retirement on it before, this is just putting that into that base salary for cabinet, and then 2% increase for cabinet. And then I mentioned earlier, we wanted to do the COVID stipend for all of our employees. The stipend for certified looks a little bit different based off of what their employee group recommended. But this would be the $1,000 based on FTE prorated. And again, like we did last year, split payment, $500 when you sign the contract or employee agreement, and then $500 in October. And then last but not least is employee benefits. We don't have dollar amounts in here for this. Part of that is because at this point we don't have the health insurance determined yet and what those premiums will be. We actually meet with Kairos on Friday to look at what those premium changes could be for next year. So we don't have that information quite yet. But again, we would still continue to provide the employee paid medical insurance. Of course, that varies depending on which policy. So there are premiums that employees pay for, but that part of it. Employer paid life insurance and accidental death dismemberment. So for certified and classified, that's $50,000. For admin, it's $50,000 times plus 1 time their salary. And then the cabinet benefits would include the paid medical, dental, and vision for employee only, employee paid life insurance and accidental death and dismemberment, which is at $75,000 plus 1 time salary, the employer paid TSA, and the performance pay. So for our next steps, on March 8th, we will bring forth an action item for the salary schedules and benefits. And then we will also have the authorization to issue contracts. Then on March 10th, these certified employee contracts would go out to employees to review and start sending those back in. And then sometime in April is when we will send out the administrative employee contracts and the classified notice of employee agreement. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Board Member Greenberg.
Could you please remind me on the stipends that were paid out for retention, basically a signing bonus in effect, how were those paid out last year?
Sure. So it's not a signing bonus. It's retention stipend for people who have been here. So the way we did it last year is if you were employed by June 30th, you received, and when you sign that contract or notice of employment agreement, the first payday afterwards is when we paid employees. We have talked, and we have to talk about this a little bit more. It puts a little bit of burden on payroll doing it that quickly as they're coming in, but we would pay the first $500 April-ish, May, when those employee contracts are signed. And then the second portion was paid in October. So to receive that second portion, you still had to be with the district and employed when the school year started, or with us in October when we made that second payment.
Doesn't it, I'm not sure I understand why we split I'm not sure what the benefit is of splitting the payments for these staff members. How many people, I mean, could we not say, if you're employed by July 1st or June 30th and you show up I mean, you are working here on whatever date in August. Wouldn't we just pay them after that next payroll, their retention bonus? I mean, they're employed, they've signed their agreement, and they've shown up to work.
Well, there's kind of two parts for the doing it later. The one part is because it was a retention, we wanted to ensure that staff, did come back for that second part of it. The other reason behind when we do it in the second part of the year has to do with there's a timing, and so we prefer to pay it over fall break because you have to pay overtime on it if there's overtime that week. So if we pay it over fall break, there's far less overtime that takes place for the classified employees, and so it's to help with the
So it's like a cash flow,
yeah.
almost. Okay.
Yeah.
And if I can add, on the front end, when employees make decisions about coming back, we want them to turn their contract back in, and so that's a recognition that they're making a commitment to us. That's why we pay the front end before the end of this fiscal year, and the back end to ensure that they actually come back and work for us. So there is
Yeah, no, I know, but I think even if you do divvy it up like that, I was just curious why so long, because our staff are, generally speaking, back on campus or in the facilities buildings as early as August, some or even earlier. So to do August, September, and then October just seems like quite a long ways to go for staff who frankly are just not paid very much. So I just wanted to raise that question.
Board Member Beckman?
Shannon, can you remind me the dates, if you will, and I can email you can email me the liquidated damages dates schedule?
I would have to, HR has those, so I would have to.
June 1, June 15.
I'm not sure, I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay,
I'd
could
have
you
to get
just
that for you.
I know this is discussion item, so I'd just be curious, the schedule, if you could send it to the board, just to look at. Thanks.
Board Member Greenberg?
And to follow up on Board Member Beckman's request, it would be nice to know how many people did leave after that first payment.
Yeah.
And how many people left after the second payment, because I can't imagine it's much. I mean, I don't think our staff game the system. I think they genuinely enjoy working here. So I understand the delay in payment. I just want to make sure that we're not kind of holding staff out for something that, frankly, they really do deserve and is a clear benefit for our district. Staff who, have more than 5+ years of experience, even 3+ years of experience, is very difficult to come by in the state, and it also helps our TEI when we're calculating our budget. So lots of benefits to our students and staff there.
Absolutely.
Other comments? Board Member Hartwells, do you have any comments?
I do, yes, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Crozier, for your presentation. Just to add to a little bit of the discussion about the timing of the retention bonuses, the discussion last year, if I recall, the timing is the delta should someone receive a bonus or retention bonus and then leave within a certain short window right after the school year starts, then the payroll would be a deficit. So the liquidated damages number that makes that not administratively efficient. I appreciate the question to have that sent out to the board so we can all see how those dots connect. My question actually, Shannon, is asking you the various sources of funding. On the consent agenda item, it just says various in terms of the funds, and this could be something that as a follow-up, since we have a couple of weeks to discuss this and chew on it before we see it as a formal action item. But there is the ESSER funding, and then there are other buckets of funds that these different types of proposals are going to be drawn from. So if we could just have a little more specificity on that before March 8th, that would be great.
Absolutely. And truly, it's ESSER. M&O is the largest one, but we have grants, we have community education employees, a significant amount of classified staff, so that comes from Fund 520. Food Services pays for their staff, that comes from their 510s. So we can look at the breakdown of where that's at and cost estimates
for those.
That would be helpful, thank you. And particularly some of these stipends that have been resurfaced would also be helpful to understand where that's going to come from.
Is that it, Dr. Hartwells? I assume yes. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Then I would like to make some comments on this. I'm just going to be very direct with this. This is really a tough conversation and tough decisions for, I think, anyone to make. At least it is for me. Trying to find human value and correlate that to dollars and cents. We see constantly great things that our employees do. And I believe that this governing board has really taken a lot of steps to show that appreciation for our employees with making sure they're compensated for work that they complete above and beyond their contracts. We have pages of stipends that we do good on. Those are promises that we've made to our employees to show that we respect them. And one way we do show respect for our employees is through financial compensation. I will note that I recognize that Dr. Menzel did inherit many practices that we are asked to make decisions about tonight. And, you know, when we look at our vision and mission and our values, one of the values that jumps out to me is about equity, creating that equitable environment. And I see that as a work environment as well. I come from an experience where every staff member that works on our campuses is just as valuable as anyone else. Unfortunately, we do correlate financial gain to certain positions. I've always seen everyone who works on a school campus or in district office as my colleagues, not as supervisors or subordinates. And so when I think of these questions about finances, that's the core of my decisions and questions that I ask. So again, putting someone's value, again, with past practices, and as our district tries to move into better practices, I would really like for you to, Dr. Menzel, to take a real close review of current practices around hiring in the Valley here for all positions that we hire for in our school district. And I would like for you to address some of these particular outliers that exist in practices, and for us to create a better example of how to be great employers. To me, I learned a long time ago that I have an opportunity to be in this particular situation as others in the past, not viewing it as an employee, but as an employer. And I want to be the best employer as I can so that we don't have to waste our resources recruiting and rehiring employees, that employees love coming to Scottsdale schools and don't, you know, they start their career here and they end it here. That's one of my goals. And so I'd like for you, Dr. Menzel, to carefully examine some of our practices and some that you inherited, and maybe put together, you know, take what's been created with this, but specifically the cabinet contracts, because I know, I do believe those are kind of outliers, and I realize a lot of the past practices for compensation have been in place for quite some time. And I understand why some of them are in place and others not so much. So I'm going to ask that you do that. I also would like for us to, it was brought up earlier about our payout for the COVID retention bonus. I would really like again, trying to be respectful to our employees. I recall what it was like at the beginning of the school year when you're waiting for your first paycheck. Teachers come back and staff members come back in July, and there's so many days, and sometimes they get paid a few days, and sometimes they have to wait several weeks before they receive a full paycheck. I would like for us to be divvying out that second installment in August, as close to when employees have already reported back to work. I understand the reasons why I've heard why October. it's a nice thing for us to do, is recognizing, and it doesn't seem like a whole lot of money, but if it can help someone pay their rent or pay their bills, I think we're doing the right thing. So I'd like that to be bumped up. And I noticed that we had a prorated retention bonus for certified staff, which I think is awesome, just want to note. But I also wonder why we're not doing it, and this is, I don't need an answer, it's more of a rhetorical question to be considered, because this is a discussion of why we're not doing this for our classified employees as well. As I understand it, we have a lot of classified employees or support staff that are in the beginning years and at the end of their careers in our district, and we don't have a whole lot in between. Maybe our compensation is part of that reason why, and as people move up, it gets harder for them to move away from that job to take a lower paying job potentially. So I would like for us to consider, again, supporting equity. What are we doing to prorate and recognize the service of some of our classified employees who have been dedicated to our district for a long time? One more thing. We mentioned there is a proposal for an athletic director stipend of $5,000 due to significant additional time requirement of their duties. I would also like for us to consider, because I know we have lots of great programs for our students. Athletics is not the only. I value the work of our coaches. I've been an athlete and a coach myself, and I think they don't make enough money. I recognize that. But we also have performing arts sponsors and supporters and teachers that are not listed here, as well as robotics. You go to those robotics competitions. I believe there was one this past weekend, maybe the weekend before, and we had one in our district. That's a lot of time to prep for and support those robotics competitions. So I would also like us to examine some of those other, I don't even refer to them as extracurricular, I know they are, but those types of programs that really benefit our kids outside of the typical classroom. So I think I've said everything I wanted to say on this, but I know I can feel comfortable coming to you if there are other things. So I appreciate all the work that went into this by our employee groups. I know that wasn't an easy lift, trying to figure out what piece of the pie everyone wants and what piece of the pie everyone gets. I get that. But I'd like for us to continue to be even more considerate than this proposal shares. Board Member Greenberg.
Madam President, you jogged my memory on something. Going back to Mark Tucker, have we begun discussions about what a futuristic salary schedule might look like and how staff may be compensated? You know, that we have read about and we have seen some really unique ideas out there, not just in other states or in our own state, but of course internationally as well. And being future focused, what have we done there?
So as Shannon mentioned earlier, we've started the meet and confer process, and we had to move pretty quickly to get to agreement this year. Right. The meet and confer process is an ongoing effort, and so we still have to finish the full agreements for this year. Some of those get to the time consideration that Mark Tucker talks about in terms of how teachers spend their time and how we reward staff, so that I anticipate will be part of the conversation. And then as we work through phase 3 of our strategic planning process, where we begin to put action plans in place, some of that will get further fleshed out. So I see it as an iterative process. This is just the first step because we had, very tight timelines to get this moving forward, but it is on the agenda. We've been doing some internal reading of creative ideas in terms of how to create more time so that teachers can spend the time planning and working on student-centered approaches, consistent with what Mark had identified in the book.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that, because I do think that there's a lot of benefit to the ideas that were expressed there and things that I hope our staff support as well. But if, that's the benefit of the process, really. So thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Greenberg. And again, evolving to a better process.
Absolutely.
Great. Any other questions or comments on this particular discussion item? Nope, I guess not. Thank you, Shannon. And with that, Dr. Menzel, can you introduce our next presenter?
Dennis Rayler is a man who needs no introduction. We've had many positive comments about him this evening, and he's got the next two agenda items. We've got the Pueblo rebuild and then the Tavon work as well. So turn over to Dennis Rayler.
Well, thank you, Dr. Menzel. Okay, am I fighting the IT guys? Okay, we'll leave it here. President Sanowski, Vice President Hartwells in the cloud, members of the board, Dr. Menzel, I am very happy to be here to talk about Pueblo and a little bit later Tavon Elementary School. I'd like to first say thank you to Pueblo and the Visioning Committee and the work that they've done. They're not kidding when they say it takes a lot of work. So thank you to them. I would be remiss in not saying that we have some direct community members, direct neighbors to the campus that have some concerns. We're trying to work through those concerns. As you all know, building a school is not an easy task. Designing the school is even more difficult. And we can't always satisfy everybody, but we're going to work diligently to do our best to make that happen. So without further ado, tonight's presentation, both for this one and Tavon, is really to get you to know where we're at in the process. We're nowhere near the customary GMP. We haven't done that in a while, so we'll refresh your memory when that time comes. But I'd like to introduce Sue Gray. She's with BWS Architects, and she has been leading the Visioning Committee for us, and she's got 10 slides that she'd like to review for you, and then we'll take any questions.
Let's see, is it just the arrows?
The mouse. Or maybe not. Yep.
All right. Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Menzel. Thank you so much on behalf of BWS Architects. We greatly appreciate this amazing opportunity to work with you on this project. And I think the Visioning Committee stole my thunder. They thank Dennis and Shelley, who have worked endlessly with us to get everything organized, to move the project along. And as witnessed in the audience tonight, the parents, community members, have been incredible throughout this whole project. I think they've talked about everything I'm going to share with you tonight, so they're making my job really easy. All right. One of the first steps that we did when we met with the Visioning Committee was establish the goals, and it was very easy. They came up with diversity, inclusiveness, unique programs, the connectiveness, and the collaborative learning environment. And we came up with a banner statement that reflected what this project's vision will be, and it's to connect, grow, and celebrate all. Viva Pueblo. Some of the next Visioning Committee meetings was really about listening. They had a lot to share with us about what they love about Pueblo, what needed improvement, how they work. Our team of engineers and our contractor, we went out, we did our site surveys and assessments of what the existing conditions were, and they were able to share with us. We did dot polling. They shared with ideas on what resonated with them, what they felt would really reflect their community and the educational goals. We did, as I think it was Jennifer mentioned, we did a lot of planning workshops with them. They got down and they were moving things around. I really did feel terrible. We kept them there till way, sometimes we went as late as 7 o'clock. So thank you again for all your hard work. What brought us to eventually became our site plan, and as I think Travis mentioned too, we actually, they provided so much great input about how the challenges that they had on the site and helped us create what we've landed on as the current site plan. And some of the challenges that they mentioned is if you're, oh darn, my pointer doesn't work. Let me see. Oh, it does. Excellent. All right. Just to familiarize those maybe who aren't familiar with the campus, but we have Saguaro High School to the south. We have a neighborhood community to the north. We have some private single-family homes up here at the northeast, some condos along this east edge of the campus, and then along this whole perimeter there's some apartments, and their parking and shade structure is kind of along the property line. The greatest challenge we have is we have very little frontage on 82nd Street. And currently, these dash lines all reflect the existing campus, and you can see it's kind of clustered here. Unfortunately, the site is currently, a foot lower than it really needs to be for the floodplain, so it really made it not opportune to add on or renovate. I mean, we just have flooding issues to contend with. Currently, a lot of the parking kind of wiggles up here, and it's down in this area, and it's really not a great frontage. And one of the first things, as I think Jennifer might have mentioned, was figuring out the site circulation became crucial. We also talked about strategies on building placement and how it would work for flow, not only during construction but after construction. And what we ended up with was some really nice deep in routes for parents and student delivery. We ended up with some circulation around the rear to separate the services, keep that away from the private residences, keep the multi-purpose building here at the west end too, because it is the larger volume. There was a lot of sensitivity to keep the built structures as low profile as possible, to be respectful and keep things as far back from the property lines as possible. We have staff parking at the rear to alleviate some of that cross circulation that happens when parents are trying to drop off and staff's coming in. And so we really tried to separate all those modes of circulation. The playfields will be here at the south, close to the Saguaro playfields also, which was really nice. Currently, the playfields are up at the north, so, weekend activities, all those loud type of functions are now moved further south. It also allows more immediate access for the public for those weekend events, and it allows the ability to secure off the campus. At the front is the parent and public parking spaces. We have Building A is the admin building, which houses the library for after evening or after hours community functions, the nurse, administrative staff. Then we have the pre-K wing over here, so it allows for direct delivery. Students are dropped off by their folks. We have kinder, and then we just kind of work our way down to first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. And then our multi-purpose building houses PE functions, the fine arts, and dining and a kitchen, and then back of house like facilities. So, and of course, all the play courts and fields are to the south. And I do want to, again, thank the Visioning Committee. They came up with some really great ideas about how to maximize the fields and the parking, and actually a lot of their great ideas we were able to incorporate. The plans, just kind of a little bit more in depth with what's going on. Again, there's the secured main entry. We have been working with the district on some other safety and security improvements, so we have the vestibule component that is key, while still providing some access to restrooms, drinking fountains, and things like that, but really securing the campus to that single point of entry. Administrative functions, a nice, generous teacher workroom and support space. We have the pre-K, kinder, the other grades. We have this great learning corridor. As Gosh, I can't remember which parent mentioned it, but we will be getting into the next phases where we start to really develop these interior spaces and having some of these more in-depth breakout meetings with the teaching staff. We've currently met with the City of Scottsdale. We've also met with a lot of the facilities maintenance to make sure that we understand what all your standards are. We want to make sure that this is not only a beautiful environment that supports 21st century learning, but also we're creating something that is sustainable, energy efficient, and easy to maintain. Let's see. And then this, the multipurpose building is down here at this corner. One of the other components that the visioning committee really wanted to hone in on was the sense of courtyards, creating secure circulation for students once you're within the buildings. There's a lot of interior circulation, and then the secured interior courtyard, so the students could move between the buildings, the main buildings, and the multipurpose for dining and PE and arts. We are starting to look at some of the conceptual designs of what the exterior will look like. We're working through some of the colors now. I think at the last visioning committee meeting, we brought in some ideas and thoughts on colors. Again, we're looking at durable materials. We're trying to be very sensitive to the budget, the existing construction cost challenges that are occurring right now. So we're looking at metal canopies, a lot of masonry, and then some areas with maybe some featured colors. Using color as wayfinding for the administrative entrance, the multipurpose building. Similar to some of the other campuses, there's been a lot of activities creating indoor and outdoor amphitheaters for times of the year when they want to do activities outside, so creating those types of spaces. And then also, again, using color to help wayfind different areas of the building, since it is a relatively long expanse. You know, we looked at areas to differentiate the 4th, 5th grade from the 2nd, 3rd grade, and then again the preschool. Now, did I hit everything? Yeah. So, are there any questions?
Board Member Greenberg.
I don't have any questions. I appreciate the process that has been undertaken here. And as always, these visioning committees have been, I find, very helpful to the rebuild process and all the projects we do. And I would like to thank again our members on that committee. For those who don't know, I think Jennifer Flores is on just about everything. Sometimes I look over, I'm like, why isn't she sitting there? But no, I really do appreciate all the volunteer hours that our parents, I know my understanding is that there were some real estate contractors there, that there were, our SROs, others stepped in, even some students. So I really do appreciate the time and effort everyone puts into this. This looks awesome, and the dedication that Mr. Rayler has to working with our neighbors in our good neighbor policy is also very much appreciated. So thank you.
Board Member Beckman.
Let me see if you can hear, okay. Also, thank you. Dennis, you sent out a lot of information, and I did see this before, so if I missed something, I apologize. You can tell me it's in the information, but I have a couple of questions that hopefully you can answer pretty quickly. What capacity is this being built for?
600.
So, and we're at about?
Students.
Okay, we're a little less than 500, including pre-K right now, I think. Okay. So we're built for growth a little bit. With our other elementary schools, it's really important to the community to save some of the historical aspects. Has that been a conversation? Are there historical things to the school itself that you're working with them?
I guess that depends on the perspective. But yes, we always go through and do an inventory of all of the artwork and the various things on campus. I'm told that there's a big purple rock out front. That's kind of important, so we'll make sure that we save that. But a lot of times back in the 70s and 80s, they stuck everything to the wall directly, and it becomes very, very difficult John Thomason's in the room, he's with CORE, and they tried to pull stuff off of Hopi, and it was a whole Saturday worth of chipping, and it produced only a small handful of survivable tiles. So we do go through the process, and we will make sure that anything that we can salvage, we will salvage, and if we can't salvage it, we'll make sure that we get Victor out to take some great 4K pictures of everything, so if they choose to put it in a portrait and frame it and put it on the building, they can do that as well.
Great, thank you. And just some other quick one and done questions. You've had significant conversations about shade cover, right? Because that seems to be a consideration every time we get towards the end of a project of these K-5s.
Yep.
We always go back and say, is there enough shade cover? So we've done that.
Well, and the good thing is there's a lot of internal circulation to the campus too, so that helps us not have to buy as much shade. But as you know from Kiva, we did spend a few bucks on shade, so we'll do the same.
Two more quick ones. The multi-purpose room, the gymnasium is a competitive size to the rest of our K-5s, right?
Comparable, yes.
Comparable, competitive.
Competitive,
yeah.
no.
Not competitive, comparable, sorry.
Yes. I'll say it out loud, Hopi and Pima were a mistake. Creating a competitive-sized gym that have no bleachers and have no competitive sports, K-5, is not appropriate for K-5. And since then, starting with Cherokee, then Holcomb, Kiva, they are all PE spaces that are appropriately sized for the little ones. And then obviously we've got basketball courts and play courts outside, but they're a nice space to cool down if need be, but they're definitely a nice place to have PE.
Okay, last one, I promise. Can you just touch briefly on the lighting and is there going to be a lighting study with this? I know you talked about it before, but that was always a significant concern.
So Sue and her team, they've heard me very loud and clear that we are not going to make any mistakes on this one when it comes to lighting. We know that by putting that building where we are, we have to be ultra sensitive to the community members adjacent. So they've had conversations with the engineers. Sue briefed me just before the meeting about low lighting, the different things we'll do to minimize that light pollution, if you will, of the LED lighting. So we're very aware of that challenge and what we need to do. We need to obviously make the campus safe, but there's not someone always on campus, so why keep the lights on? Most vandals are actually afraid of the dark, so the more you light up the campus, the more likely they are to do their work. So turning it dark, which is what we do on most of our campuses, after midnight, everything gets turned off, parking lot lights get turned off, and if you drive by at midnight and it's not, let me know. But we do try and respect our neighbors in that way.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great questions. Dr. Hart-Wells, do you have anything to add?
Yes. Yes, thank you, President Sinowski. I had a couple of questions. Dennis, could you speak to, if I missed it, I apologize, what environmentally cautious materials or lighting or features have been contemplated in the build, and or sustainable features? And then secondly, I'll just ask this one while I have the microphone, and then I'll turn it off. I missed it. Is the growth, the space contemplating a science lab? Thank you.
Good evening, Dr. Hart-Wells. This is Sue Gray. I'll take your first question regarding some of the sustainable strategies. One of the low-hanging fruit that we look at all the time is the building placement orientation. We have, putting it on the north end of the site allows us to have a great north-south orientation. And that helps a lot with the solar heat gain. We are, it's masonry, it will be painted, but we are insulating the cores, the exterior walls, so we will have a good building envelope. We're also using low E glazing, It will be tinted also to help minimize some of that glare. We'll have an R38 roof. We're using low flow water fixtures. We'll have the LED lighting. We will have lighting controls and building automation systems so that the district should be able to set the thermostats and regulate and control the mechanical units. We'll have high-performing rooftop units. I'm trying to think what else we've got. I think those are the main strategies that we're incorporating into this. And then the question about science labs. For K-5, I believe the curriculum, I think they have a lot of the class core science programs within the actual spaces, though we have been talking a lot about how this is a very unique program. There's 2 teachers per class, the movement of students, the locations of wet sinks for these types of activities, and then having that collaboration area in the corridor is going to be another area that the teachers will use. But other than that, I don't believe there's anything specific for science.
Was there anything else, Dr. Hartwells?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question for you,
Okay.
Sue and Dennis. 2 things. Solar, are we, gotta ask it, is it planned, rooftop, and why not?
So, you want the straight answer?
Yes.
Because I always give it to you, you know.
Yes.
We have not been terribly successful with our solar programs. The negotiated contracts, not that I couldn't negotiate a superb contract for you. Dr. Menzel has heard me say this, Ms. Crozier has heard me say this. We need to get our act together with the current solar that we have before we put anything else on our buildings. Putting it on our buildings is a bad idea. It's a really, really bad idea. We have 2 roofs that need to be done, Saguaro and Chaparral, and guess what? They have solar on them. So it's not just a matter of re-roofing the building, we have to do something with the solar. Now, I hope you would fire me if I put the solar back on a brand-new roof. So we take them off like we did here at Coronado, take the entire system off, put it on parking structures, which all the teachers love. But solar is just not a path that I'm willing to go down for the district, that I could say to you that this is a great deal and we need to do this.
Not even for parking structure?
We would really have to see how it pencils out, but the parking structures themselves cost money. I believe moving the structures off of the roof onto parking structures with the solar system already in hand was $750,000 for Coronado. So that is not money that was calculated into the bond program, and the way we've seen escalation to this point in construction costs, I bet that same solar system could cost us over $2 million to buy the system and then to build the structures. So I could certainly look into it in my free time, but it just hasn't panned out for Scottsdale schools. And I think you can look around the state, and those same school districts or school districts around the state are having those same kinds of problems.
Can you go a little bit further, Dennis, and talk about how much more we're paying for those solar contracts that were negotiated a decade ago than we would be if we didn't have them?
Pierce Energy is one of the vendors that you approve every year, and they kind of watch our energy consumption. And the last review that they did last year, they told us we would have been better off just paying SRP for electricity instead of having solar systems. So we are currently having conversations with a couple of vendors to really dig in, roll their sleeves up, dig into our solar, and try and get us squared away. So it really, I say it in jest, but it's very serious. We are not in a position to add solar to our schools.
Noted, thank you. I also note that Board Member Greenberg would like to say something.
Yeah, I just want to make it very clear, in case anyone did not hear Superintendent Menzel, but the contracts on solar that we are discussing are 10 or more years old. They are not things that this board has negotiated, and they are certainly things that Dennis Rayler has been very critical of for many years now, and appropriately so, given that given their expense. I think, Madam President, the issue is that is really the way solar is sold and installed in the state of Arizona, and it is a hindrance to using it effectively and efficiently. But that doesn't mean, are there other roof options? I mean, like roof gardens or rocks or other things you can put on to insulate the ceiling, or is that just not feasible? Is that equally as problematic?
Like to create shade structures for the parking, is that what you're asking?
Not the parking, but the buildings themselves that they're in. I mean, is there any reason to do that, or are the roofs pretty well insulated as is?
The roofs are very well insulated, and the solar, we believe, actually contributed to the early demise of the roof here at Coronado. The reflection from the panels onto the TPO roof actually caused it to decay quicker. So we know that for a fact. The manufacturer warranted that because of that. So it's just not a path that I would suggest we go down. But if you force me, I will.
I will not force you to do that.
Okay.
I think it's important, though, that we are recognizing our shortcomings, and as we move through these projects, we're improving and being more conscientious with our expenditures. One last question about fresh air access, because I know that has been a concern with COVID. Will this new facility provide fresh air access to the classrooms?
So the ASHRAE standard is what the engineers follow to make sure that we are optimizing outside air into the building. In Arizona, that can be a little bit of a challenge during certain times of the year, but we are going to make sure that we are maximizing that outside air intake for the buildings.
So that teachers could choose whether they have more fresh air or stale air.
Well, no, we don't want to let them choose. We're just going to give
I
them.
want to open my window because it's a beautiful day out.
Yeah, opening windows is also problematic from a security perspective, but we will maximize the outside air into the building. So they might have to hold on to their desks as they're flapping in the wind, but we will make sure that our outside air is at the highest level based on our last 2 years of experience.
Okay. Any other
And of
questions?
course, filtration is always an important factor, so
Yes.
we'll have that covered as well. And before we move on to the next one, I wanted to say thank you to Shelley. Shelley has been an incredible leader through this. She just puts in the time, sends me texts, say, what about this? And it's been great working with her, so I'd like to acknowledge Shelley and her leadership for Pueblo.
Thank you, Dennis. On to Tavon.
On to Tavon.
On to Tavon.
So Tavon is not a rebuild, but it is equally important to our students, our staff, and their amazing principal, Julie Ballard. So I'll start with Julie this time and say that Julie has been a superb leader in all of this. And although Tavon is not a rebuild, man, it seems like that one's a lot more work. because we're trying to do so much. And I've got Darlene Cadman here with SPS Plus Architects, and she's going to share with you and walk you through the process. We've done visioning with Tavon as well, even though it's not a rebuild. There's a lot of moving parts with Tavon. If anyone can remember back to 2016 when the bond was passed, there were really two issues that Tavon needed to address. One was the safety of the students, getting them across Osborne onto the main campus, and the other was the parent parking, parent queuing. That's a challenge everywhere we go. Once upon a time, everybody got on the bus, and buses took kids to school. Now parents take kids to school. So I'm going to turn it over to Darlene, and she will entertain you for about 7 minutes. And then we'll answer some questions.
Thank you, Dennis. Good evening, Dr. Menzel, President Sinowski, board members. So I have a 1-hour presentation. I hope that's okay. 1 hour? No, not going to work? Okay. No, I will be brief. This is actually a copy of the presentation that we used at the community meeting last week held at Tavon School. It was, I don't have the results here because we sent the board presentation ahead of the meeting, but we always try to do a Mentimeter so we can have participation from the audience. We did ask when were those first buildings constructed at Tavon, which, by the way, is 1954, according to the as-built that we have. The architect of record wasn't someone famous this time, per se, but we did have that, Mel C. Ensign, not Al Beadle. And the population of Phoenix in 1958, 1.1 million. So we're a little bigger now. A few things have happened. So we did ask the crowd that, got them used to the Mentimeter, and we had those results. But really, where we are in the process right now on this project is just finishing up programming and moving into schematic design. So we did a significant amount of visioning, not only with Julie and with Dennis, but with a visioning committee that Julie put together of interested teachers on campus, administrator, also some parents. We had some parent involvement as well, which was wonderful. We went through many, it was a lot of meetings working through the priorities of this project, specifically because it's not a large project, it's not a rebuild, it's not we're doing everything. This has to be much more surgical and more precise in what we do, and we have to make sure we spend money in the right places, but yet still leave a school that feels like it's refreshed when we're done and has all the right elements. So it's not an easy task by any means, but with Julie and Dennis on board, we're working through it. The priorities list that the team established is this list, and the first priority was everybody be on one site. We do not want students on the south side of Osborne. We want everybody on one site, which means we're actually taking the population and moving them all into one site into the buildings that are existing, so we do have to accommodate some of the additional growth for that. Number 2 was drive-through, safe, efficient parking, drop-off, and buses. It's always good to separate buses and parents. They generally don't mix really well. A literacy center. I am amazed at how great the school has accommodated their needs for the literacy people, which includes, of course, Title I, speech path, reading, math, all of that. In classrooms here and there, in spaces where students are often talking over top of one another. So they've done a great job accommodating that, but is there a way that we can accommodate it better moving forward? And that was very high on the list. A larger PE space. Certainly the PE space that is there currently is a little bit small-ish. It is smaller than some of the rebuilds that you've done. And how can we expand that space and look at opportunities there? Staff and student restrooms. This school definitely needs a little more space on the staff and student restrooms. They have a lot of them concentrated in one area where they don't necessarily need them, and so it goes. So the restrooms is a very important thing. Building 11 refresh, that is specifically because Building 11, I think, is the original one from 1958. It may not be. I think it might be a 60s building, actually. But, however, it does need a little love. Connecting doors in classrooms. I'm sure you guys are familiar that a lot of the teachers here in SUSD like to support one another and have that connection to other teachers within their grade. Makerspace collaboration area. There is this very unique gifted classroom, I call it a makerspace, at the school right now, and that's one of the buildings that we're actually proposing to demolish, and we want to make sure that we recreate that and make it even better. Updated classrooms or rooms throughout the campus. Again, that is, although we're doing a surgical amount of work, we want to make sure that we leave the campus feeling refreshed and that it doesn't feel like we barely got there. So that was our priorities list. And so since we are in programming, we don't have full-on drawings for you today, but we have some lovely sketches. So the existing site plan, which we have, if you thought the Pueblo site was narrow, take a look at Tavon. It is definitely a very skinny site, has a lot of buildings on it, a lot of clusters of buildings, and has a significant amount of stormwater retention in between all of those buildings. So moving and finding places on this site to expand parking with a single access or single side of street access from Osborne is a challenge, and also trying not to impact all that stormwater. We don't want to be in a position of having to create all new stormwater ponds and those sorts of things. So the site needs are fairly extensive, and it's actually the first thing that we are targeting with the work that we'd like to do on that, so that's actually the most advanced. The plan here right now, which is a combination of site plan and some enlarged building elements, is actually a very small diagram for a significant amount of work. This was trying to find out what is the best configuration for this school when we bring the pre-K students on site, and how do we separate the bus lanes from the bus lane from the parents, and how do we accommodate more parking. There is almost nowhere to find parking on this site, but we did manage to squeeze a few inches here and there. So we have expanded the parking throughout the site. I think we've gone from 72 to 93 stalls currently, and we did also separate the bus lane at the front from the parking, so that has been separated, and we've lengthened the drop-off lane. We just received a traffic impact assessment that said the on-site was around 760 linear feet, and off-site, meaning gathering on the street, was around 600 feet. And so we've exceeded both of those numbers in our planned parent drop-off lane, so that our total is over 1,400 linear feet of drop-off, which will be very beneficial to the parents. So we did increase parking. We have looked at increasing that drop-off lane, which was our first priority. And then all the wonderful colors on the site are really is a really small expression of all the work that Julie has done, looking at where are the best places to put the students if we're bringing on pre-K onto the site and we're moving the classrooms around. You know, are we grouping the classrooms? Where are the ALC classrooms going to be? Where are the LRC? I'm not going to get into the details of that because that really would make this an hour-long presentation. But I am going to say that the pre-K students, we're moving into this building here, which is the current kindergarten building. And we're looking at the potential of the admin building becoming the kindergarten building, which leaves us a space on the front here for us to create a new administration building and get also a little more street frontage on this school. I have literally driven by it after I've been there before and went, oh yeah, I was supposed to turn there. So we want to see if we can make it a little more of a street presence. People see the school there. As well, as I mentioned, we're grouping these classrooms. We're looking at doing some small modifications to the art room, and I'll get into the details of that a little bit here. This is our sketch right now for the administration suite becoming kindergarten. So 4 kindergarten classrooms with restrooms in it, additional restrooms for the site, an additional ALC classroom, and then also the administration suite, which is not larger than what they have. It will be the same. It has the same number of offices that they require. It has a workroom, the SUSD standard of the lobby with the conference room and the restroom off of it, secure space. And also a very important component of that was Julie being able to see out to the site and be able to see up the center of the site and what's going on. And she has that. I kind of think of it as like the nest, so to speak. So this area is the existing media center, the library area, and we actually have a former computer lab there that is not being used as computer, but is now one of those spaces where they have, I think, 4 different kinds of literacy coaches in there working with students with no walls. So if you have a group of 3 students and someone else has a group of 3 students, and you can imagine how difficult it might be to teach speech or math in those spaces. So we are looking at creating similar similar to what we had done at Hohokam Elementary, offices that have space for that bean-shaped table so that they have walls, they can do the work in those spaces and actually have a space where they're all working together, a common resource center. So that took care of one of the major priorities, which was the third priority on their list. In addition, because we are bringing classrooms on the site, the pre-K students, and we are rearranging all the students, we were left with a few more classrooms we needed to create. We took over the existing art room for 2 grade 4 classrooms, so we are doing a small addition just south of the media center that is art and potentially an ALC classroom. We're not sure yet exactly what that classroom will be, but it also has the storage and the kiln space for the art room. So that seemed like a good place because, again, on this site, there is like nowhere to build a building without either running into utilities or taking out valuable stormwater or ruining the parking or drop-off. So it is a challenging place to find a place to build it, but this seems like a really good location for it at this time. PE space was a much harder, more difficult nut to crack, and specifically because looking at doing an addition onto this building is cost prohibitive for a number of reasons, not to mention also, again, the space constrictions on this site. But we have an existing courts at the backside, and we've been talking about the potential of covering those courts, creating space that is not only shaded, but maybe has fans in it. And so the space is somewhat conditioned, although not an addition onto the school, does provide an additional PE space. And we've looked at 2 options. One is to just cover the courts that are currently existing in that space. And the other option is to look at an addition here, which I think I have, here, on the back side, which is not a new building, but a new court that again would be covered. And this was actually received very well by the Visioning Committee and by the community as an opportunity to expand the space on that site for the PE classrooms and give them a little more area to play. So we actually had a vote, option A and option B, and I think it was a dead tie. I don't have the results with me, but I think it was a dead tie, and there was a few people that were shouting out rather than using the Menti. So yeah, no consensus yet. We're working on that. So at the end, we had this screen up and asked the Mentimeter crowd what they thought about, did we achieve priority number 1, bringing all the students onto the site, which we did. And they agreed with us wholeheartedly. And we were curious what they felt about the new literacy center, knowing the conditions that are there now, and they were all very happy to see that happen. So there you go, not an hour. Not 7 minutes maybe, though. Any questions?
Board Member Beckman.
Thank you. And thank you to Principal Ballard and your team. I've been to Tavon, obviously, and have been concerned for quite some time. Kudos to you for implementing creative strategies with regard to your busing and the parking and trying to make that work. I know it's been a challenge. So this has been a long time coming and very exciting, I'm sure, for your whole school. With regard to the Building 11 refresh and other areas you're touching on, first of all, if Hohokam is any indication of your talent, I'm very much looking forward to seeing what you're doing at Tavon.
Thank you.
Do we have, since you have a limited budget, do we have any indication? I'm a little bit concerned about what we might find when we start really doing the Building 11 refresh and something that was built in 1954 and some of the peripheral spaces. Do we have any budgetary concerns with regard to this?
So when we say Building 11 refresh, this is what we call a light touch renovation. We call things light touch or heavy touch renovation. Heavy touch renovation is moving walls, changing out mechanical systems. This is a light touch renovation, meaning we're looking at replacing countertops that have been water damaged because of the sinks and replacing the sinks and the faucets. We're looking at repainting the spaces. We're looking at removing those lovely 1990s AV corner unit things. We're going to miss those a lot. But the carpets had already been redone, which doesn't require updating. We're looking at maybe removing some of the wire mold if it's not being used anymore. So really, we are refreshing the space, but we're not doing any heavy architectural or heavy systems upgrades, because really the buildings are in a shape that they don't require that at this time for the use that they are. At some point, those buildings will have exceeded their life, but it's not today.
So we're not taking down drywall or anything like that?
That is not part of the plan at this time. Did you want to expand on that? Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Dr. Hartwells, do you have any?
I do. Well, I have one. I'll just put out there, but I'm guessing that given this is a light touch, a light refresh, that might not be outside of the scope of the job. First, but thank you to all of you that have been involved in the visioning committee and leading the charge here with this project. It is exciting. And this is directed to the water usage. Would you, I guess, if it's something you could comment on, and if not, just something to keep in mind as the project moves forward, and that is the amount of water that's used at Tavon and the cost associated therewith. It happens to be, under our current contract, the highest amount of water per gallon that we pay, the district pays, is the usage at Tavon Elementary. I'm not clear why. And again, it might be outside the scope of the project, but we are talking about the school and doing some changes. So if that happens to be something that could be considered, that would be very helpful.
Dr. Hartwells, I think I can answer that for you. We mentioned Pierce Energy. They've been watching our water for about 4 years now. And when that was brought up about 2 years ago in the measurement and verification report from Midstate Energy, we did address that with Pierce Energy, and we believe we've got that under control. So I will send that additional information to you.
Thank you, Dennis.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, comments? I had one. What will happen, what's proposal for the south side of Osborne, that parcel of property? Since we're moving all the kiddos over
So far, nothing.
Okay.
But I have had several departments throw their hat in the ring to be able to move out there.
And you told them highest bidder, right?
I just said, well, that's up to the cabinet member.
Got it.
But we do have several departments that would love to spread their wings, and because there is plenty of space there once the kids are
Sure.
off of there. So Panda Special Ed is there now in, is it 3 spaces?
Yes, 3 spaces.
So they'll move, but their testing program is there. So that has not yet been a discussion.
Okay, thank you. That's exciting. Thanks.
Thank you. All done? Thank you.
I believe so. And we will move on to agenda item 8, our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
A move and second. All in favor of approving the consent agenda as amended, say aye.
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 That passes 5-0. And Dr. Menzel.
Yes, so for item 8E, which was pulled off the consent agenda, there is a technical correction. I'm going to invite Alexis to come up and explain the correction before we ask the governing board for approval.
Thank you. President Sanowski, Vice President Hartwells, board members, and Dr. Menzel, Ms. Wagner. On the February 22nd consent personnel action agenda item, there is a recommendation that we change the action for our employee Karen Swift to be moved under classified substitutes and temporary workers section and not under the employee compensation action item. And the Reader's Digest version of that is that she resigned in December. She was asked to come back to assist with the transition of the new person. So she was given a date to come back on January 3rd to do that. And then now she has been offered to work through June 1st, up to $4,000 in pay when she is needed to assist in that area on an as-needed basis. So as of right now, I think she's only been paid about $138, but moving from that original section was a clerical error, and we recommend the change to the different section.
Board members, do you have any questions on this? Dr. Hartwells? No?
No, I do not.
Okay. All right, I ask for a motion to approve the agenda to approve the agenda as amended and as updated.
It's 8E.
Yeah, 8E.
I move to approve consent agenda item 8E, personnel action items 1/12/2022 to 2/8/2022 as amended.
Do I have a second? Second. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. We move on to our action items, 9. Starting off with Lori Bird.
Good evening, everyone. We're kind of back. Let me make sure I can find these policies. We're kind of back. These policies were first, if you remember back, introduced by a board member. We've had lots of conversation. We've had, for some of these are third read. For one of them, I believe it's second read. But we're bringing the process back under our existing policy, BG. There's now been extensive review. I looked at all of the conversation, all of the work that had been done, all of the concerns and questions received from board members, and came up with a recommended version of the policies. What you'll see in your packet, and I'm saying this for items, A through G, I believe. So this is kind of the preliminary speech for all of those items. What you'll see in your packets is a red or a black line as compared to our existing policy. So that seemed to be the easiest way to look at all of these, to know what you were actually voting on, so that we didn't have to track each individual iteration as it was gone through in the various meetings. So I'm going to start with the black line of policy BA. I'm going to pull it up there and simply ask you if you have any questions that I can answer related to this particular policy, or if you have any discussion. We are going to have to go through and vote by motion on each one separately. They're not a package deal, so to speak.
Board Member Greenberg.
First, I just want to thank my colleagues on the board, as well as Council Lori, and obviously our legal staff, for taking the time to really compromise and put some great suggestions together. For tonight, I fully support the recommended versions that our council has brought to us. I did just want to address 3 factual points very quickly here. The first being the policies, the way in which the policies were brought here and the time spent on them. We did have a superintendent committee that dealt with policy that would have, I think, helped streamline this process. Unfortunately, that policy committee had to be stopped due to time commitments and other matters. So unfortunately, I know watching the, what's the saying, the sausage get made or the meat get made isn't fun or interesting and time consuming, but this is the process we have to go through. In addition to that, I hope that the public understands that at any time the president or superintendent can shift items to other agendas in order to bring up more pressing items that we have to deal with. We have spent quite a lot of time on student performance and setting out specific goals. We've spent multiple meetings, several meetings last year on that, so academic success as well as policy revision are not mutually exclusive items. The second matter is with policies BA, and I'll speak to BBA. Again, the general policy position is we draft policies that are in line with the law, that are in line with how the board actually conducts its business and what the governing board ought to do. And all these policies have been drafted in accordance with the law on that point. So I just wanted to raise those 2 points just to clarify any statements that have been made earlier during public comments. These are not radical changes by any means. These are changes that are in accordance with Arizona law as it is set out. Thank you.
Any other comments? I would just like to note on BA that the best interest of student learning, achievement, and well-being is in writing, and that is what our focus is. So adding that is wonderful. Thank you to all that helped create that as our focus. Dr. Hartwells, do you have anything to add to BA?
I have nothing to add in substance. I just want to comment that there was a public comment made earlier this evening with reference to, I believe the inference was the language was removed from BA with respect to responsibility of employing short and long-term strategies that are responsive to the district's needs within the budgetary limitations. That has not been removed. It was actually put back in at the, I believe, through this iterative process that we've gone through. I just wanted to point that out, and I also want to thank Ms. Bird for all of her efforts cobbling together what were probably 5 different angles and interpretations. So thank you very much for your efforts, Lori. Greatly appreciate it.
It's my job.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice President Hartwells. Do I have a motion to approve action item 9A, third reading approval of revisions to policy BA, school board operation goals?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor to approve the revisions to policy BA, say aye.
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 Those opposed?
No.
The motion passes 3-2. Moving on to action item 9B.
Give me a minute for the tech to work. This is, I won't give you the preamble. As you can see, this policy has been changed in accordance with the black line. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Board members, any questions, comments, concerns to share at this time on this policy BBA?
President Sanowski?
Yes.
I would just like to draw the community and my colleagues' attention. The language that is struck in the back line, in the black line on the screen, down, starting with the duties and obligations of the individual board member include the following, and then a list A through I. Much of that, if not all of it, is now in a different policy that we'll get to in just a second. So that language has just been moved from policy BBA to policy BBAA.
Correct.
I just want to point that out. That's not the preamble language, but just the list of responsibilities has not been removed out of policy. It's just been moved policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Hartwells. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the third read and approval of revisions to policy BBA, board powers and responsibilities?
So moved.
And do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve this. All in favor to say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say no.
No.
The motion passes 3-2. Moving on to action item 9C, third read and approval of revisions to policy BBAA, board member authority and responsibilities.
This is the item that Dr. Hartwells was mentioning, where the responsibilities of individual board members, as opposed to a collective of the board that was in BBA, have been moved to. And this, like I said, encompassed a lot of what was in BBA.
Thank you, Lori.
Previously.
Thank you. Board member Beckman.
So, to be clear, Ms. Bird, that all of the strike through on the bottom was actually moved to policy BCC, correct? We created a new policy that we...
Correct. That is also correct.
So this policy is not changing, except for the strike through is leaving because we already approved it, BCC, and it was moved over.
It is changing to the extent that what you see as the black underline is being added to the policy, and then what you see as being struck has been repurposed, so to speak, and incorporated into BCA, I believe you're correct, where it makes more sense thematically, I guess, for it to be there. And it also makes it more clear and concise to have these broken up the way that they are.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, I ask for a motion to approve the third reading and approval of revisions to policy BBAA, Board Member Authority and Responsibilities. All in favor, say aye.
We have to have a motion in a second.
I'm sorry. What time is it? Do I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion to approve and a second. All in favor to approve 9C, third reading approval to revisions of policy BBAA, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Moving on to action item 9D. Lori?
Getting there. Just making sure they line up here. Yep, we're on policy BDA. This relates to the organizational meeting of the governing board, aligns to law and practice as mentioned before. I'm happy to answer any questions. It is the appointment of a new officer is the part, largely, the largest part that was added to this particular policy.
Thank you, Lori. Any board members have questions, comments, concerns that they'd like to address right now? Hearing none, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve 9D, second reading and approval of revisions to policy BDA, board organizational meeting.
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
And I hear a second. Thank you. All in favor to approve the second read of and approval of revisions to policy BDA, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
The motion passes 3-2. Moving on to 9E, third reading and approval of revisions to policy BDE, board committees.
This policy is allowing the board to create types of committees that you weren't actually allowed to create. Beforehand, it addresses some discrepancy in the fact that we actually do currently have an audit committee, and brings us in line with really what our current practice should be.
Thank you for that summary, Lori. Any board members have questions or comments they'd like to make at this time? Seeing none, I ask for a motion to approve the third reading and approval of revisions to policy BDE, board committees.
So moved.
And do I have a second?
Second.
A first and a second. All in favor to approve the new revisions to policy BDE, board committees, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed? Dr. Hartwells, I'm sorry, I did not hear your vote.
I said aye.
Okay, thank you. The motion passes 5-0. Moving on to 9F, third reading approval of revisions to policy BEDB, agenda.
This is what primarily deals with what your agenda looks like and how changes to that agenda can be made, and really just lays out some terminology and some expectations around the different things that can happen in a governing board meeting, for example, executive sessions. Very little was changed in terms of striking here. I just do want to note that where you see G, public comment is not struck from the agenda. It's simply renamed open call to the public as opposed to public comment, and I apologize that it kind of got in little font, so I didn't want you to miss that and it to be misconstrued as being eliminated from the agenda item itself. This is not the policy that actually deals with the structure and format, time, place, manner, for example, of public comment. This is simply the agenda policy.
Thank you for that summary, Lori. Board Member Beckman?
Okay, so just to get some clarity on that, because I was confused last meeting.
Okay.
At the very bottom of this policy, it states that as long as there's a 24-hour notice, that the board president and superintendent could remove an item. Could the board president or superintendent eliminate public comment if we approve this policy?
Under existing...
From the meeting, the next meeting.
Okay, it depends on how policy BEDH is going to read. And so all of these policies have to be harmonized and they work with each other. So we can't have one policy violate the other. So under existing policy BEDH, it does indicate that there will be public comment held at a regular governing board meeting. Therefore, you couldn't decide not to do that. However, you could remove a information and discussion item. Perhaps it's not ready. Perhaps there's information that's been missing or something like that. So if the answer to your question is could they arbitrarily just decide to remove public comment altogether from a regular governing board meeting, the answer would be no.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Greenberg.
Just as yet another example from our own meeting today, we had at the beginning, item 5, special presentation. Special presentation is an item not currently contemplated by staff, not currently contemplated by our policy. These amendments would allow the superintendent and president to add that item in without violating policy. So these are just amendments that have been asked for so that our policy is in line with what we actually do for agendas.
Any other comments?
President Sanowski?
Yes.
May I ask a question? I should like to point out some language that I believe might be inadvertently included. We could go to the paragraph of the changes to agendas prior to board meetings. The first sentence after the parenthetical, the superintendent or board president may add or delete, exclude a matter, an item. It looks like some language was perhaps not deleted. That reads very awkwardly.
You're correct. That is a clerical error. It would probably better read may add or delete or exclude a matter or an agenda item.
Yeah, may add or exclude a matter or item, or an item.
Or, Dr. Hartwells, do you have a suggestion?
Ms. Bird, what you read, or I believe is the intent of the language, and I'm comfortable with that. I just think as written right now, it is awkward and a little confusing.
So, okay, I understand.
So is it deleting the word delete and deleting a matter?
It's, the way I read it was the superintendent or board president may add, comma, delete or exclude a matter or agenda item no later than.
Correct.
Meaning, once the agenda is published and we've noticed it to the public in compliance with open meeting law, we cannot change that agenda.
Board Member Beckman?
So I know I keep repeating myself, but now that we're going over this language, and it says that would normally be included on an agenda, please explain. Because the way I'm reading this earlier is if there was some sort of content that wasn't ready, define for me if this should pass. what is allowed to be excluded? Are we talking about the structure of the agenda itself, meaning, or are we talking about an item such as the Pueblo presentation? Because it says that would normally be included on an agenda.
So it could be both. And remember, we're not talking about changing an agenda once we're in the public notification period.
Right.
We're talking about changing, and remember, the people that have the authority to set the agenda are the superintendent and the board president in consultation essentially with each other. So this would be, if the superintendent maybe couldn't attend a meeting, they could, last minute, we could take superintendent's comments off of the order of items on the agenda. If there was no information and discussion items, no, I can't quite envision that happening, but I suppose it could, that we only had consent or action items, for example, and we had no presentations simply for information and discussion. That line item on the agenda could be removed, or a single item under that category could be removed. But because we have another policy that deals with public comment is not something that would be eliminated under this policy.
Okay, so public comment, to be clear, with this verbiage would not be an item that could be taken off, because we have an additional policy that says we have to have it.
Correct.
Okay.
Under our existing policy, that is correct.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Go ahead, Dr. Hartwell.
Thank you. Ms. Bird, could you also just make sure that it is clear? It isn't just a whim by which any of these agenda items might be removed or delayed. Again, this is pre-24 hours in advance of a board meeting. There is some structure and some bookends functionally as to when that could happen, which is the phrase when inclusion would be unduly repetitive or would impede orderly and efficient conduct of the meeting, or for efficiency or accommodation. And that was some of the, I believe, some of the reasoning in the first place for making these changes that are expressly articulated here.
Correct.
Yeah, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Lori, have you marked the proposed amendment language?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I wrote it down.
Okay, good.
I can't change it as we
No, that's
speak.
fine. I just wanted to make sure.
I
And I
did.
believe, Dr. Menzel, you made note of it as well.
And we
Okay.
can always go back and rewatch if we need to get that exact wording. I would never change anything that was out of line with what the board approved.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion to approve action item 9F as amended, third reading and approval of revisions to policy BEDB agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
And I have a second. Thank you. All in favor of approving as amended, say aye.
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 And that passes 5-0. Thank you. Moving on to 9G, third reading and approval of revisions to policy BEDD, rules of order.
We have existing rules of order. They look a lot like the rules of order that you're looking at, except for two additions that you see in G. Well, I guess that's one addition. Two paragraphs in paragraph G. The president may recess the meeting without a vote of the governing board. That was an ASBA recommendation, actually, that came back, and then it kind of got tabled, and the recommendation was withdrawn because of the larger conversation that the board was having. I recommend putting that back in with the caveat that, of course, it is to maintain a safe environment should the need, should there not be time, for example, for safety reasons, to make motions and take a vote. And then it's a recess. It's not an ending of the governing board meeting. It's to allow the governing board meeting to later proceed under its regular rules of order. The next Addition, that the president may implement and enforce other procedural rules of order that don't conflict with this, is so that the meeting can be run efficiently. We do not strictly adhere to Robert's Rules of Order. That's not a law, that's not a regulation, that's not required under open meeting law. And so in order to have a orderly and efficient meeting, it is within the president's authority to enforce other rules as is necessary and reasonable.
Thank you, Lori. Do any governing board members have any questions or comments they'd like to make? Board Member Hartwells?
I do not.
Okay, hearing none, I ask that I receive a motion to approve the third read and approval of revisions to policy BEDD.
So moved.
And do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor of approving the third read revisions to policy BEDD, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion passes 4-1. Thank you. We'll move on to 9H, approval of purchase of network equipment and licenses for Pueblo rebuild. Dr. Menzel?
Thank you, President Sanowski and members of the governing board. Dr. Watt is coming to the podium. We have two items. The next two are hers on the agenda. They relate to E-rate programming, and I thought it might be helpful for a very brief review of how the district benefits from E-rate participation and what the structure of these two recommendations happens to be.
Great, thank you. Good evening, President Sanowski and Vice President Hartwells, governing board members, Dr. Menzel, and Ms. Wagner. Tonight, we are recommending the approval of the procurement of network equipment and licenses for the Pueblo rebuild through CDW. As described in the board agenda item, using the E-rate process requires soliciting bids and selecting a provider well in advance of the purchase process. However, by engaging in the E-rate process, SUSD can receive up to 50% reimbursement for E-rate eligible products and services. Approval of this item enables us to take advantage of the E-rate funds next fiscal year when the purchasing of these network products is anticipated to occur. So I'd be happy to address any questions you might have.
Governing board members, do you have any questions? Great. Seeing none and hearing none, I ask for a motion to approve 9H, approval of purchase of network equipment and licenses for Pueblo rebuild.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a first and a second. Can all those in favor say aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Michelle?
Thank you.
Yes.
Tonight, we are also recommending approval of a multi-year contract for structured cabling with CDW as described in the board agenda item. As previously mentioned, this could save us up to 50% on the E-rate eligible products and services. In the process of engaging with our E-rate consultant, because this process requires a ton of paperwork to make sure that it is all moving smoothly, our network and systems coordinator, Paul, asked a question saying, what other eligible services or products are we not currently taking advantage of? And so the result of that conversation really is this next agenda item. Structured cabling is the description of the various network cables that run through the building walls and ceilings, connecting to network devices like printers and access points, docking stations, back to the intermediate network connections where the switches and routers are, and then between different network distribution points within a school campus. So those are E-rate eligible, and every year we have different installations of new structured cabling. We have moving of ports from one location to another, and we also have construction going on. So you'll notice there are multiple funds that this could potentially pull from over the next few years. So approval of this item does enable to take advantage of the E-rate funds in future years for the addition, modification, and maintenance of structured cabling, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Watt. Do any governing board members have questions?
President Sanowski.
Yes, go ahead.
May I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Dr. Watt, thank you for doing this work. Love to see reimbursed 50% of eligible purchases here on this consent agenda. My question is about the volume. In your opinion, in your review, the amount of materials that are listed here in the agenda item is something that as the district would consume? Those are reasonable amounts of materials?
It was really difficult to project what our future needs are going to be. Some of this, somewhat because we want to be able to be more open to future modifications in the future than we have been able to be because of being able to receive 50% of our funds back. And so some of the requests that maybe had been denied in the past, we'd be able to fulfill now. Also, we looked forward as far as we could to anticipate some of the upcoming projects. So, you know, construction projects that require recabling, access point refreshes that may require recabling. So we wanted to definitely include a volume large enough that anything could be included, but not overshoot too far because we don't want to misrepresent the opportunity to the vendors that bid on it. So this hopefully represents kind of the maximum because that way all of our purchases will hopefully be E-rate eligible for the next few years.
Understood. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I ask for a motion to approve 9I, approval of multi-year contract for structured cabling.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
The motion has been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 The motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Dr. Watt. Moving on to 9J, approval of intergovernmental agreement with the City of Scottsdale for school resource officers, SROs, with SUSD. Lori Bird?
So bear with me, I'm the last item of substance on the agenda in terms of action items, but I thought it would be helpful both to you and perhaps to the public, instead of putting this on a consent item, to kind of, I feel a little bit like a car salesman, to introduce you to some of the features of our SRO proposed contract. I do want to say that much of this contract contains language that you've already approved from the City of Phoenix, because I believe that was a request that we align our two SRO contracts so that they are similar, since they are both performing the same function. The total number of officers, as you'll see on page 1 and page 2, are 4 officers for high school, 5 for middle school, and 1 sergeant to oversee, for a total of 10 officers. Exactly where those officers are placed is up to, because this is I believe a 5-year contract, is in collaboration with the district and with the City of Scottsdale Police Department in terms of exactly what schools those officers are cited on, even though they support all district middle and high schools. These aren't officers who are burnt out and who just kind of show up and say, I'd like to be an SRO. They are selected through the competitive process used by the City of Scottsdale. So you essentially are going to get the best officer for this particular job, including our crisis K-9 officers. We wanted to make sure that program was memorialized within the IGA. This is the first place that you'll see the crisis K-9 officers come up, and they are also specially trained. They are employees of the city. They are not our employees, and they must train, they must test, and they must continue their certification as law enforcement officers. So again, you're not getting someone who's retired, who's not keeping up on their training, their credentialing. You're getting an officer that will be highly trained by the city. I'm not going over this line by line, by the way, but I do have lots of yellow and orange stickies. There it goes. So I draw your attention to line item 12, which is that the city is going to provide the transportation and the equipment for them. We're not going to incur a cost to provide them with the equipment that they need for their job. And we will also work with the city to develop the training modules, because obviously middle schools and high schools are unique environments to work in. And so perhaps there may be an additional knowledge that's needed on the parts of those officers, and the school district, in consultation with the city, will help develop and implement that training. I then call your attention to item 16, and that is the 75-25 split in costs. And we will know the cost for the following year by February 1st of each year for budget planning purposes. There may be, a little wiggle room in there, but for the most part, by February 1st of each year, we should know the cost of our SRO program under this particular IGA. Oops. Skipping down to item 20. It's not highlighted on the screen, it's only highlighted on my. These are the goals and objectives of this IGA. I think that you will be happy to find that many of the things that you've talked about, had questions about, maybe been concerned about, are now memorialized within this IGA. The main objective is to foster a safe and supportive school environment for students, and to establish a framework for decision-making by the district regarding student misbehavior and students in need. That's a collaborative process. In line item 22, I do want to note that it is the administration that is still responsible for the code of conduct violations and routine discipline. That is not the responsibility of the SRO. It still remains within the purview of our administrators to enforce the code of conduct and routine discipline. However, one of the goals of the officers and one of the goals of the IGA is to minimize the number of students who are out of the classroom arrested or are court involved. And I do want to point out that that's a measurable metric, by the way. And so there is a built-in measurable metric as to the efficacy of this particular IGA built in, at least in one place, which is item 23. In item 26, you'll note that this IGA contemplates that there will be initiatives and trainings such as violence prevention and intervention, emergency management planning, and this could also fit in with some other programs related to gun safety, gun storage, threat assessments, those kind of things. It's not specific as to the initiatives to allow us the flexibility to meet the needs of our population as we go, because this isn't just a single year IGA. If that scares you, don't worry. I'll get to why that's okay at the end. And that also goes along with 27. The community and relationship building, prevention, health, safety topics are all contemplated to be part of the mission and function of our SRO program within the school. These are specifics as to the responsibilities of the SRO, kind of operationalizing the goals, or at least some of the goals. And you'll note that they fall into three kind of broad areas. One is to be part of the threat assessment team. So they're an important component of that, as well as just our general overall safety. They also are very active in our truancy programs, both in a supportive way and as well as trying to reduce incidents of truancy, and they do our child abuse investigations. And that's a really important component, to have someone dedicated to be able to look into mandated reports of child abuse available, so it doesn't kind of get buried maybe under some other. And in Scottsdale, we always report to our SRO as well as to DCS. We have a dual reporting system, but it's a really important function of the SROs. And if you look at item 33, you'll also notice that this is the other measurable metric. Not that there aren't other ones, I'm just highlighting this, but this is the other measurable metric of this IGA, is the reduction in truancy and abuse rates that the board could ask for reporting or data on. There are many other 36 is to provide law-related education. Again, this is where the district has the ability to shape maybe the SRO's involvement in some of our training and prevention and other educational policies. I do want to point out in item 38 what the crisis canines are used for and what they're not. They are not search dogs. They are not sniffing students' bags. They are not sniffing students' lockers. All of you have met those all the crisis canines. I'm not sure that they are trained. I know they're not trained to do that, nor do they seem fit for that particular duty. They are also not guard or attack dogs to chase down students. They are truly on campus as a means for calming, distraction, and bridging communication, as well as community outreach. And again, I think we've all had the dogs here, and we've seen the types of dogs that have been chosen to do this work, and they're really not all that intimidating. And although I guess some people are just afraid of dogs in general. So if you're worried about accountability, Section 40 talks about the accountability mechanisms for the SRO. There is a mechanism by which to make a complaint, including to Internal Affairs. So they don't have unfettered ability to just act. There is a complaint mechanism in place, and they can be relieved of their duty for poor performance at any time. You're going to get into a whole bunch of legalese. Essentially, it says who's responsible for what if someone gets hurt. I'm not going to go through all this, although I will point out in item 46 that it is, the agreement is for a term of 5 years, commencing on July 1st, 2022, expiring on June 30th, 2027. However, if you look at provision 48, either party can terminate with or without cause, simply with 30 days notice. So although it may seem like you're locked into a 5-year contract, you're not. This contemplates that perhaps there might be a need for change. And with all of that being said, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Or if I can't answer them, Dr. Sakos can, but we won't let her touch the mic.
Board members, do you have any questions on this proposed 9J, the approval of the intergovernmental agreement with the City of Scottsdale?
Board Member, President Snowski.
Yes.
May I?
Yes.
Thank you. First, I want to pat Ms. Bird on the back yet again. I think that the changes to this contract compared to the contract that the district has was previously entered into, and which is still current, by the way, still active until June 30, are substantially improved. So thank you very much for your efforts in taking to heart the comments and where we're at with our students and our community right now. So thank you. I do have a question, and it may be the answer is it's outside of this IGA, and if so, that's fine. Overtime pay. So I note this is M&O. The money moving under this IGA is through M&O. What about overtime? which may or may not be an SRO. How is that handled? Is that's outside of this particular IGA?
So you can't see it, but Shannon Crozier just picked up her mic, so I'm thinking she may have the answer to your question, Dr. Hartwells.
Yes, Vice President Dr. Hartwells, the IGA here is for the SROs, and I believe it does specify an amount for overtime. I know the previous ones, I believe, did. But generally, when we're doing something outside of this, we will hire officers to work events. It kind of depends on the event, but the majority of that, I would say, does not come out of M&O. Usually those additional activities are for things like prom, dances, athletic events, and in that case, it's going to be paid through the club, so Fund 850, or if it's an athletic event, auxiliary funds. Our great receipt money is used to pay for those officers. Really, the only thing that might come through M&O when it comes to officers overtime would be when we have officers at, say, a governing board event or a district event like a governing board meeting. Most of the time, the overtime events that are happening take place outside of M&O events, and it's really going to be, like I said, an auxiliary or a club account that's utilizing those officers.
Thank you, Shannon.
Vice President Dr. Hartwells, do you have any additional questions?
I do not. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from here? All right. I have a question. Why did we go to an extended year contract with this instead of an annual contract?
There's a lot of reasons why IGAs go to extended year contracts. One, because it is a lot of staff time and effort, and I do want to say that I thank you, Dr. Hartwells, for the compliment, but it was the work of many people and not just myself that were involved in this IGA. It takes a lot of staff time. You're working with you're working with the city and you're working with the governing board, so you're working with two boards. But there's also some stability and some consistency when you're in a multi-year contract, particularly if there's a provision at which it can be terminated by either party. And so you don't want an IGA when you're talking about personnel, you're talking about staffing, to kind of change it's a lot to do every year, and as long as you have a viable exit criteria, should things not be working, it really does make a lot of sense to have your agreements in place that both sides feel are reasonable, and to move forward in a multi-year way instead of renegotiating the contract every year. I wouldn't advise getting into a contract of 20 or 30 years for any situation, but particularly an intergovernmental agreement. But 5 years in this particular case, particularly for a high school student, it allows maybe for some continuity of those SROs as a student goes through, 8th grade through 12th grade.
Thank you. And I do note that number 48 states that we have we can provide a 30-day written notice.
Correct.
Perfect. And then there was discussion in the past about potentially working this to a 50-50 split like we used to have with the city. Would that have to be then at that point? Because it was kind of, we might be able to work towards that. I know the city increased their policing budget quite substantially. Would we have to wait then until this particular IGA has ended in order to pursue a 50-50 split?
I'm sure that the costs were negotiated, and this is the IGA that's before you. So yes, this is a 5-year IGA with a 75-25 split.
Okay, thank you. And yes, Dr. Menzel.
I would just add to the 30-day provision, so that if we're 2 years down the road, the district's got a financial crisis and we can't meet 75-25, we've got a couple of options. We can amend the agreement, that's contemplated here, or we could terminate. So I would say at this point, we did push. This is better than what we had in the prior IGA, not as much as we'd hoped to get, but there are opportunities for partnership and building on the partnership with the city, particularly if the district found itself in a financial situation that required it.
And there is an amendment amendment provision. I could scroll through it and find it, but I know for sure that there's an amendment provision, but any amendments obviously have, as we always do, have to be approved by both boards.
Okay, thank you. And I do note that, I really appreciate that this is not just a bill of sale. I felt like our previous agreement was that. We have 11 pages of pretty rich information here, so I really appreciate that, those who worked on it. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I see people fading fast. Okay, with that, I ask for a motion to approve 9J, approval of intergovernmental agreement with the City of Scottsdale for school resource officers for SUSD schools.
So moved.
Moved
Second.
and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That motion pass. Any opposed? No? I thought I heard Dr. Hartwell's. Motion passes 5-0. Future items. Thank you, Lori. Board members, would any of you like to propose topics for future consideration? Board Member Beckman.
Yes, I think this was requested before, but I will reiterate that I would love to see a special education audit, including but not limited to best practices, communication with parents, testing, IEPs, 504 plans, et cetera.
Awesome, thank you. Any others? Nope.
President Snowski?
Yes, yes.
Yes, I would like to request that a presentation on the state of academic achievement in the area of science be made to the board. Thank you.
Thank you, so noted. Any others? All right, move on, seeing none, we will move on to 11, dates of upcoming meetings. Our next meeting is Tuesday, March 8th, 2022 at 6 p.m., special governing board meeting at the MDA, followed by Tuesday, March 22nd, 2022. 6 p.m., that will be a regular governing board meeting here at Coronado High School. Governing board reports. Board Member Beckman.
Just quickly, we are having Project Prom again. I know it's late. Hopefully we'll have a few people hear this. It's going to be Friday night, March 11th and March 12th in the morning at Saguaro High School, open to all Scottsdale Unified School District students with a valid ID. They can come and shop and get free formal wear in the parking lot of Saguaro. So second event, last year was great. I hope we get a lot more students even.
Board Member Beckman, do you need assistance with setup with that?
Absolutely. So
what would that look like?
I will get you some information.
Okay, I was just thinking since the public might be listening. Okay.
Feel free. If you are available on those dates, would love to have you come out and help our set up or have our kids help them shop, etc. There's a lot to be done.
Thank you. And that's a great project, so thank you for taking that on. Any other governing board reports?
President Snowski?
Yes.
May I share?
Yes, please.
Thank you. I have a few, I wanted to pat on the back. The Chaparral Association of Parents and Teachers had put together a toolkit to enable our community to easily weigh in on their aggregate expenditure limit with their state representatives. And I just want to thank them for that effort and their along the lines of community, and then in the interest of collaboration, the Desert Mountain Parent-Teacher Organization shared that toolkit with the Desert Mountain learning community. And so I thought that was a very poignant and proud example of community and collaboration. So I want to thank all of those parents and teachers who were involved with that. I'd also like to say thank you to Dr. Rand, who I visited at Redfield Elementary School a couple weeks ago, as well as to Governing Board Member Jeff Fleetum at EVIT, the Power Campus. I was, as I mentioned earlier, able to take a tour of their new aviation building, which is outstanding, as well as see the new construction under the way for their engineering program and their vet med building, which is coming along. Those programs are growing substantially. And we did talk about some of the perceived or barriers to getting more kids exposed to kind of the offerings that are made there. I also wanted to share that I would have the pleasure of serving as a science fair judge, Paradise Valley High School, as part of their Center for Research in Engineering, Science, and Technology program. It was really heartwarming to see those projects. I also got to serve as a reviewer for the third year in a row for the American Chemical Society, their Congressional Fellowship Program in Public Policy, as well as I want to thank the Paradise Valley United Methodist Church and their Church and Society Committee for hosting me in one of their meetings just a couple weeks ago to learn more about how they could be helpful in addressing the aggregate expenditure limit waiver to support the schools. So thank you to them and all of their efforts. And then I am not sure if this was already mentioned, and if so, it's worth mentioning again, but I noted that the Arizona Republic student athlete was featured, an academic all-star from Chaparral High School, Miss Morgan Bank. And I will just proudly note, it was written, she had a 4.8 GPA, plays soccer at Chaparral. So I just want to say congratulations to Miss Bank. And if that was already done earlier, it's worth a second time around. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vice President Dr. Hartwells. I would just like to add my appreciation to those that contribute regularly with their time and their resources, including our SUSD Foundation, Charles Foundation. Specific appreciation to Gabrielle Preston, Carter Unger, and our assorted APTs for their gifts to our district. And no other comments from governing board members or board reports? All right, with that, I would like to ask for a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor to adjourn this meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. This meeting is adjourned.